Daddy, I got first place. Andrew smiled. This is Hannah, the daughter. In her 15 years of life, she had given her father many reasons to be proud of herself. Just now, the little girl had called her parent to report another victory. She was in Canada at another Olympiad for young programmers. Hannah went there as part of a group from the Center for Gifted Children, where she had been studying for 4 years. Congratulations. My good girl, the man said. I owe you a present. I'm so excited. Hannah's voice shook with excitement. She cared a lot about this contest. Hannah had already decided on a profession for about 5 years. She would be a computer programmer, and she would definitely go to Harvard University. There are so many opportunities for young professionals in Cambridge. Not like in their provincial town. Hannah was already getting crowded here, but to get into such a prestigious university, you need to win all American and international competitions. So Hannah did her best. Get some rest now. Andrew told his daughter, take a walk around Cambridge, now that you're in such a beautiful city. Just be careful out there. Yes, Daddy, of course I love you. Hannah pressed reset. A short beep sounded in the receiver. Andrew smiled again. Hannah was so smart, so intelligent, so sensible, so much more intelligent than he was. At her age, her daughter will accomplish a lot. And just 9 or 10 years ago, Andrew was looking for information about schools for children with everything was going to give her to the 1st grade in a remedial educational institution. In a regular school, and certainly in the gymnasium or lyceum, she would not be taken because in his 6 years the girl did not speak a word, mooing. Sometimes something or gestures explained if she needed something urgently. But this rarely happened. Most often the daughter was in her own thoughts sitting on the windowsill in the nursery. It was her favorite, looking out the window and thinking about something. Hannah hardly smiled at all during that period. Andrew didn't immediately notice that something was wrong with his daughter. Too preoccupied with his own grief. And Hannah, what could Hannah possibly understand? She was only 2 years old. She probably didn't even remember Alice, her mom. That's what Andrew thought. But the disappearance of her mother from her 2-year-old's life had taken a serious toll on her. That's what we found out later. The consequences were catastrophic. Every time Hannah had another success, Andrew was happy, rejoicing. I can see why. But sadness came from the fact that Alice couldn't. She would have been happy to know that her favorite long-awaited daughter was growing up so smart. But that's just the way it turned out. Andrew grew up in a wealthy family and was an only child. What's more, even his grandparents had him as their only grandchild. It is not difficult to assume that from an early age, Andrew grew up in love, recognition, and attention of loved ones. He had everything he needed to be happy. Beautiful clothes, expensive toys. He was taken to expensive resorts. Delicious pancakes and fragrant pies were prepared for him on demand. Andrew received detailed answers to all his questions, and at any moment, he could play with one of his relatives on the table, for example, or in the ball. He was never refused. The relatives adored Andrew, and he reciprocated them. It is a blessing to have such a strong, friendly family, where everyone is ready to support the other in any situation. When Andrew became older, he had to study a lot. In prestigious language gymnasiums, a lot of lessons were assigned. And additionally, the boy was engaged in several sections: swimming, boxing, financial literacy, business school, all because he was to become the heir to his father's mini empire. So the parent called the network of pizzerias, the owner of which was. Business steadily brought good profits and grew, developed. Even branches in other cities opened. Andrew, since childhood, delved into the intricacies of the family business. His father often took him with him to the office, showed his very young son financial documents, in general, actively preparing his own replacement. I don't know what will happen to me. You must be ready to be at the helm at any moment, his father said. True, he'd add, but I hope, of course, to remain in charge for a long time to come. And in any case, I need a worthy assistant. Pretty soon you'll be my right-hand man. Andrew didn't mind. He liked his father's business, liked to get into the nuances of his business. And the young boy sometimes had quite worthwhile ideas, which his father praised very much and put into practice. Andrew enjoyed seeing his parents' eyes light up with pride for his only son. Then Andrew went to study in New York, entered the Faculty of Economics. Not really. His father himself connected some of his connections, but Andrew studied completely independently and was one of the best students of the course. Capital life fascinated the guy. It was bright, rich, diverse, full of adventures and new acquaintances. But New York is tiring. It is good to come to have fun, to get new impressions, but it's also great to study here, of course. Where else can you find such a cluster of talented teachers, theorists, and practitioners who have achieved dizzying success? But by the last year, Andrew realized that his destiny is to live in his native small town. Quiet, calm, cozy. There's no rush. The road to the office takes a maximum of 20 minutes, and that's if you get into traffic. And in general, the hometown has its own special atmosphere. It gives strength and confidence. Anyway, Andrew decided to return to his hometown, especially since his father needed his right hand. But Andrew knew that if he wanted to stay in New York, his parents would not have pressured or opposed him. They'd support their son anyway, and it's just great to have such a solid backing behind him. Anyway, Andrew came to town and got to work. Together with his father, they thought of a new project to open a Japanese restaurant. In the end, everything worked out, but not immediately, but after almost 5 years. For a while about the project had to forget, as in Andrew's life began to happen important events one after another. And then at one time this restaurant practically saved a man's life, distracted him, shifted his attention, and helped him get away from destructive thoughts. But that's all later. Anyway, one December afternoon, Andrew decided that it was time for him to unwind. He called his former classmate Alex, and the friends went to the skating rink. Just like in the good old days, the skating rink was big. It was located in the central square of the city. Music was playing loudly, and people of all ages and builds were gliding along the ice. Snow was falling from the sky in large flakes. In the center of the rink rose a 3-meter-high dressed Christmas tree. Christmas was coming soon, Andrew's favorite holiday since childhood. So far, his parents have made him a sweet gift collected in a beautiful bag with Santa Claus' favorite candy of their already 25-year-old son. Andrew was genuinely happy about the surprise every time. So warmly became on a soul at once memories and happy childhood in a head surfaced. Andrew was confident on skates. When he was a kid, he and Alex had managed to go to the hockey section for 2 years. Then both of them didn't have time for sports. They started serious studies. But the skills haven't gone away. Here he is, Alex, already at the other end of the rink, trying to meet girls. Andrew grinned. His buddy wouldn't miss a single hottie. He'd never miss a girl like that. Andrew stared at his friend. And that's why the girl in white down jacket and light jeans probably didn't notice her right away. So fragile, almost transparent. And he, a big guy, came at her and, of course, knocked her down. The young men exclaimed at the same time. Andrew suddenly felt his cheeks blush. He had pushed a man. The boy hastily gave this stranger a hand, helped her up, and she apologized. Andrew couldn't believe his ears. It would be more logical to hear the girl's indignant exclamation. Not that sorry. I only recently started to skate. In general, I don't know how to skate well. Bumping into everyone here. Andrew looked into the girl's wide-open blue eyes and realized that he didn't want to let go of her hand. Though the girl had been standing on her feet for a long time, and she obviously didn't need his help anymore. Long auburn strands of hair stood out from under a white-colored down jacket, and the girl's cheeks drooped sharply from the frost. She looked so beautiful, so young, so touching that the guy couldn't take his eyes off her. Maybe, if you don't mind, I'll give you a lesson. Teach you how to skate. Get better at staying on the ice. That would be just fine. Individual coaching is something I never dreamed of, but this is that's how Andrew met his future wife. Only at the time, of course, he didn't know it yet. He didn't even think about it. He just enjoyed talking to a beautiful girl. So, looking like a snow maiden in that white jacket of hers, they then skated for a long time. Alex had long since left the rink. Andrew and Alice still didn't want to part. They talked about everything that day. They talked about all kinds of things, as if they had known each other for 100 years. Andrew marveled at how much they matched in everything. Of course, the young people exchanged phone numbers and started dating. Andrew knew, of course, about his father's plans for his only son's personal life. The parent wanted the guy to marry Megan, the daughter of a local entrepreneur and business partner. Then the financial whizzes would combine their empires into something grand. Megan was a pretty good girl. Andrew's age, serious, career-oriented. She was also preparing to become her father's right-hand woman. Andrew had even been okay with being her spouse at first. Why not? A worthy option. But Alice was from a middle-class or even poor family. 36, it's a very thin line. Alice lived with her parents and two younger brothers in a one-bedroom apartment. She didn't starve. She didn't wear socks. She even graduated from a local university. But the family couldn't afford many things. For example, they never traveled or dined in restaurants. That is, the financial levels of Alice and Andrew were very different. The girl was a little stressed, but the guy didn't care. He dreamed of showing Alice the whole world to make her life bright, happy, and carefree. Andrew truly fell in love and felt that it was mutual. The guy realized that his parents would not be delighted with this choice. They had warned him so many times at first, and girls dreaming of hooking a boy from a wealthy family. Mercantile ladies planning to move into a beautiful life on the hump of a man in love with them did exist. Andrew knew it. He'd even met such, and more than once. But the Piranha girls' intentions were very obvious. How could they not try to hide it? And Andrew was sure that his mother and father, having gotten to know Alice better, would understand and accept his son's choice. Even if they didn't, Andrew didn't care about his parents' opinion as long as he was close to his beloved. Saw her deep blue eyes, heard her gentle voice, and felt her resting her head on his shoulder. This gesture, for some reason, especially pleases the guy. And so it came to pass. Alice was very afraid to meet Andrew's parents. But it was impossible to postpone. The guy made her favorite proposal. No matter how hard you look at it, you'll have to meet new relatives. The acquaintance went just fine. As Andrew expected, the charming bride conquered the hearts of his mother and father. It couldn't have been otherwise. Andrew, of course, met with the parents of his future wife and was surprised to note that Alice's father clearly abuses alcohol. It was noticeable in his eyes, skin color, trembling hands. The girl's mother, on the other hand, looked pale and haggard. Apparently, she had to carry the whole family on her own. Andrew felt sorry for her. Alice had never told Andrew about her father before. She was embarrassed, I guess. But did she really think it would change his attitude toward her? How could Alice have thought that? Anyway, seeing the conditions in which his beloved lived, Andrew was even more firmly rooted in the decision to take her away from there to a new life. Then the wedding was lavish, loud, joyous. Alice looked like a fairy tale princess in her wedding dress. Andrew couldn't take his eyes off her. And he wasn't the only one. The bride received many compliments from all the guests, but Alice didn't know how to accept them. She was embarrassed. But it felt good. Andrew and Alice began to live in her husband's apartment. The guy had long ago settled in his own den. He only came to visit his parents. Those were wonderful days. Alice was getting used to a new home, to a new life. The newlyweds were learning to live together. Adult relatives warned that the process of fitting in usually does not go as smoothly as one would like. Conflicts, arguments, quarrels are inevitable. But in the case of Alice and Andrew, none of that happened. Young spouses as if they were made for each other. Andrew every day mentally thanked fate that she brought him and Alice together. He could not believe that they were so much alike, loving the same movies and books, looking at things the same way. They even said the same things for each other sometimes. Alice worked as a notary assistant in a local office. Andrew ran a business with his father. Love, understanding, a full house. It seemed that only cloudless happiness awaited the newlyweds. So it was for some time, about a year after the wedding, Alice told her husband that she was expecting a child. The joy of the future father had no limit. They had already been planning a baby for 6 months, but in no way it worked out. The newlyweds were going to doctors to apply, waited for Alice's vacation, tuned in for a long systematic search for the problem. And here it is, happiness. Everything worked out. The pregnancy was not very easy. Alice was constantly vomiting. She was repeatedly laid down on the ward. Toward the end of the pregnancy, she was diagnosed with heart problems. It's like she didn't have them before, or they didn't show up. And then the body, barely manifested with the increased load, gave a sudden failure. Andrew's parents found the best doctors for Alice. She was under constant observation. Andrew was painful to see his beloved in such a state, and from fear for her. He anxiously clenched his heart. Fortunately, everything went well. In due time, Alice gave birth to a big, strong girl. At the family council, it was decided to name the baby Hannah. Andrew was happy. The baby was doing well. Alice was also on the mend after the birth, and the young mother's recovery was well underway, as evidenced by numerous examinations. Alice recovered quickly and happily plunged into caring for her daughter. Andrew also did not stay aside, trying to enjoy to the fullest the infancy of his long-awaited child. The man realized that the second baby in their family will no longer be. Doctors made it clear that Alice is contraindicated in pregnancy. She barely survived this time too. According to the cardiologist, the young woman was just lucky. Andrew, he wasn't ready to risk the most precious thing in his life, and one child is enough for them. He is also in the family alone and from nothing. Hannah turned out to be just what they needed. Healthy, smart, funny, agile, and quick. As soon as the daughter began to walk, immediately learned to climb into the most unexpected places, then in the closet with clothes her parents found her, or in the toy box. An eye on her. Hannah immediately became a favorite of numerous relatives, parents, grandparents. Grown-ups loved the girl, often visited her, gave her gifts. Andrew's mother was especially pleased with her granddaughter. Finally, I have someone to buy dresses, and that all these shorts and sneakers bored already. Sooner the girl's hair industry. I want to braid her hair. A year and a half passed. Hannah was already starting to talk. Alice devoted all her time to her daughter, singing her songs, telling her poems, practicing gymnastics with the little girl, and the results were visible. The girl in her 1.5 years quite clearly spoke in sentences, of course, with a baby or without it, but the adults understood her perfectly. Andrew's heart clenched with tenderness when his little girl addressed him. The man felt that for the sake of his daughter and his wife, he could move mountains. They were so happy, but at least Andrew thought so. But Alice once surprised him very much, saying that she was happy, of course, but still not quite. It turned out that Alice had dreamed of having another child. Hannah grew up, and the young mother, looking at the little girl, regretted that the girl would have to grow up alone. You see, I have 2 brothers, don't I? It's so great. We were never bored. We ran everywhere together, played, talked a lot about everything in the world, stood for each other. But the girl is all alone. That's not good. But I grew up alone in a family too, said Andrew with a smile. I had a pretty happy childhood too. You just don't know what you've been deprived of. Alice shook her head and sighed sadly. Andrew felt uneasy. He didn't like this talk. You know, it's dangerous for you to give birth again. Remember how hard Hannah was on us? You were on the brink so many times, but we didn't know then, but now we do, and we realize it's very dangerous. We've had enough of Hannah. That's exactly what we know, Alice exclaimed. I'm going to see a cardiologist. I'm going to take all the right medications. And I've prepared for pregnancy. I'm taking the right vitamins. I'm already taking them. I read a lot about such cases. If you keep everything under control, the risk is minimal. I'm so looking forward to having another baby. Andrew was adamant. He and Alice even had their first fight about it. His wife convinced him that everything would be fine. It was only necessary to follow the doctor's orders, to be constantly monitored by specialists, and she was ready to do it for the sake of a second. But the man could not risk Alice's life. Of course, he would like a big family, several children, but not at the same price. It was foolish to test fate again, given their recent experience. And yet it happened. Alice had informed Andrew on a sunny July morning that they were having a second baby boy. The man was truly terrified then. He probably even turned pale. Alice laughed and put her hand on his shoulder. What's the matter with you? Everything will be fine, you'll see. Andrew only shook his head. He knew, felt that nothing was going to be okay anymore. The pregnancy, strangely enough, was much easier than the first time. Alice was feeling well. She was walking a lot. She followed all the doctor's recommendations and was examined very often. She literally never left the hospital. Although her condition was quite favorable, everything seemed to be in order. But Andrew's soul was not calm, and for good reason. It happened in the night, suddenly nothing that did not portend trouble. Andrew woke up to quiet sounds. Alice wasn't well, so bad that she couldn't even call for help. Alice was gasping for breath. Andrew jumped up. turned on the light and was horrified. He had never seen his wife so pale, black circles under her eyes, white skin. Her chest heaved heavily. The woman was short of breath. Andrew grabbed the phone in a panic and called an ambulance. Then he called his mother to have her and his father come over and sit with Hannah. The baby was sleeping sweetly in her princess room and didn't even realize anything scary was going on. Andrew held Alice's cold hand, confessed his love to her, asked her to hold on, and prayed. For the first time in his life, he prayed to himself that the doctors would make it in time. It seemed to him that when help arrived, it would be too late, and that thought made Andrew panic. The doctors arrived in time, several uniformed men, and they made their way to the bedroom. Alice was given an ACG. Her blood pressure was taken. She was listened to. Then they injected her with something. The woman seemed to feel better. At least, she was breathing more freely. Andrew exhaled. Everything's going to be okay now. His parents came over to babysit Hannah. So Andrew calmly followed the ambulance, where at the same time the paramedics were fighting for his wife's life. They should be able to handle it. They're professionals. Everything will be all right. Andrew convinced himself on the way. But reaching the hospital, the man learned the terrible news. Alice was not brought. She was gone in the ambulance. The doctors did everything they could. Pregnancy, which Andrew was so afraid of, still finished his wife. The baby couldn't be saved either. For a month, the man withdrew into himself. He was not interested in anything, neither business nor his own health, not even his young daughter. He blamed himself for not changing Alice's mind, not forcing her to abort. Of course he was to blame for everything that had happened. He should have been a more attentive and sensitive husband. He failed to protect his happiness. Life without Alice made no sense. They had so many plans, so many desires together. And now Andrew was feeling sorry for himself. Who else would understand him like that? As a spouse, who would love him like that? She still hadn't seen all those corners of the planet that Andrew had promised to show her. She didn't get to enjoy her life. Mother and father tried to pull their son out of the depths of despair. They brought therapists and psychologists to him, who had life-saving conversations with the man of the soul. Sometimes it did make things easier, but only for a while. Andrew didn't understand why he had to live. The strangest, scary thing was that he didn't even want to see Hannah. Does the girl miss you? His mother tried to get through to her son. Not only did her mom die, but her father disappeared from her life. Imagine what it's like for a child. Andrew didn't want to imagine anything. He didn't care. And anyway, what could a little girl who wasn't even 2 years old understand? He'd probably already forgotten Alice and Hannah. But her mother insisted that Hannah was not well. She doesn't talk to anyone else, and she doesn't smile. Remember what a little girl we used to have. Now she sits around all day rearranging cubes. It's a terrible sight. No one can get her to shake it up. What if you can do it? It was only 6 months after the tragedy that Andrew began to come back to life. Parents, friends, and doctors helped. And of course, too, the man started working again. And then just his father offered him to develop the very project, which for a while was forgotten. A Japanese restaurant. Andrew gladly seized the opportunity to distract himself for a little while. It's a huge project. It's a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of work to get to market. That's good. Let his head be filled with familiar things rather than destructive. That's when the man visited his daughter for the first time in a long time. Andrew felt guilty in front of the little girl. It was as if he betrayed her, abandoned her, left her to her parents. After all, the mother was right. Hannah has really experienced a huge tragedy. And even if she doesn't realize it as an adult, she feels the tragedy on the level of feelings. Alice and Hannah, they were so close. She followed her mother around like a tail, even climbed into bed with her. At night, she'd lie on her lap. They were never apart for more than a couple hours. And then all of a sudden, this happened. Andrew barely recognized his daughter. Of course, he realized that children grow up fast at that age. She was barely 2 years old when the tragedy happened, and now she's 2.5. But the blue eyes in the framed, long, upward curved dark lashes looked at him too mature. The Hannah's indeed had become quiet and sad. She no longer ran around the house looking for adventure, no longer laughed, no longer even smiled. And worst of all, the little girl was silent before what had happened to Alice. Hannah spoke very well for her age. Familiar friends were surprised that it was a rarity, such a talkative baby. Her relatives were proud. That's how clever Hannah is. And now the girl said nothing at all, so moved sometimes something under his. Andrew was disturbed by this discovery. His mother, of course, had told him what was happening to Hannah, but he hadn't really listened then. He had been too caught up in his own grief. We are, of course, seeing everything at the doctor's. She's been examined. Physically, she is quite healthy. The doctors say everything will work out. She will talk. They were surprised at all why we are so worried. A lot of kids her age are still quiet, but they don't seem to really believe that Hannah used to talk. Thank you for taking care of my daughter. Andrew was indeed very grateful to his parents for taking over the care of his child. He himself was not able to take care of the baby. And after all, this baby has so much to eat. Oh no, we're happy about it. Hannah's very sweet. Andrew plunged headlong into his work. He slept overnight in the office, took care of all the financial reports, went into every detail. The restaurant opened even earlier than planned. And still Andrew was not satisfied. He wanted more, better. Andrew tried to get people from all over the city and even from other cities to come to the restaurant. With Hannah, he now, of course, he saw, but not every day. The girl continued to live with her grandparents. Andrew's mother was much engaged in her granddaughter and on the specialists she took her. And herself at home developed the little girl as she could. But there was no result. Hannah grew up, but never spoke. It pained Andrew to see his once cheerful little girl. It was as if she was still reeling from what had happened to Alice. Andrew, of course, was still worried too. He longed for Alice, continued to blame himself at times, despaired at not being able to hug the one he loved. But he's older and stronger. And then there's his job, Hannah. She cannot cope with her misfortune, and the specialists on which her adult relatives hope turned out to be powerless. Andrew, on the advice of doctors, bought a cozy country house with a large yard. On the territory arranged for Hannah a whole fairy tale park with fountains and swings, even her own little castle. And in the backyard for the baby, built a pool. Many doctors said that swimming has a beneficial effect on the nervous system of children. So Andrew took it upon himself to teach his daughter to swim. Hannah quickly realized what was going on. Now she spent summer days in the pool, swimming from side to side like a fish. But that didn't work either. Hannah did become more athletic, more resilient, which isn't a bad thing, of course. But she was still quiet and didn't really want to interact with the world around her. Andrew was taking care of his daughter now. It was his father's responsibility and duty to take care of his daughter. During the day with Hannah sat Nanny, because the little girl could not attend a regular kindergarten, and in the correctional, it did not want to give her. There are children with serious diagnoses and mental retardation. Hannah's not like that. She's very smart. Her eyes are alive, smart. She just doesn't talk. But it's daycare. Daycare is voluntary. You can take your kid, you can keep her at home. And Hannah's 6 already. School's just around the corner. If it goes on like this, we'll have to send her to a special school for children with special developmental needs. Andrew dreaded the thought. He knew that Hannah was capable of many things. She sees everything, notices and understands everything, but she keeps silent. She can't go to a remedial school. It would only make things worse. Only the doctors made it clear that there's no other way out. If a year of rehabilitation doesn't yield results, Hannah will be enrolled in a special school because she has to get an education anyway. Hannah, will you just say the word? Andrew pleaded with his daughter. You can, can't you? I know. The girl looked at her father with indifferent eyes and remained silent. And then went to her room, sat on her favorite wide windowsill, hugged her knees with her hands and thought about something known only to her. She could sit like that for hours that November evening. Andrew stayed late at the office. He warned Hannah's nanny and promised to reward her generously for her overtime hours. She didn't mind. She never minded babysitting Hannah for another hour. I've had a lot of children. Nanny shook her head. But this is the first time I've met one so quiet and unproblematic. It's a pleasure to sit with the girl. You can't see her, you can't hear her. Andrew, of course, was not pleased with such compliments to his daughter. It would already be better if Hannah, like other kids, asked 1,000,000 questions a minute and methodically trashed the entire house. But no, she sits on the windowsill, looking off into the distance. Calls for lunch will come, eat, put the dishes away. Does not call, and does not remember that it's time to eat. And so it is in everything. No initiative, no desire, except that the pool in the summer months gave the girl some pleasure. And even there, in the warm birch water, she didn't smile. So Andrew left the office late. It was almost 8 o'clock. On the way, the man remembered that Hannah's favorite cereal had run out at home. It would be a shame if she didn't get her usual product for breakfast. No, the little girl wouldn't make a scandal, wouldn't get cranky, and certainly wouldn't get hysterical. Hannah probably won't give away her disappointment in any way. In that sense, she really is a problem-free child. But Andrew wanted to please his daughter at least in small things. He carefully noticed what Hannah liked and tried to give her positive emotions more often. Andrew parked near a convenience store and got out of the warm interior of the car. It was already quite cold on a straight November evening. It was also slushy, dark, uncomfortable. His face was immediately frozen, icy wind. The man raised the collar of his jacket to protect his neck and cheeks from the merciless gusts. With a quick step, he headed for the doors of the supermarket. The doors obediently slid open, allowing the caller inside. Andrew found himself on the stairs leading up to the supermarket itself. It was already much warmer here than outside, but the dim bulb under the ceiling gave little light. There was dirt all over the floor. People were coming in. The cleaning lady had not yet had time to clean the not-too-cozy, pleasant place. The man was about to go up to the store when he noticed. A girl, a very young girl, in a thin coat that was soaked. She was sitting behind a column on the high curb that stretched along the wall. Andrew stopped. There was something about the girl's appearance that the man immediately realized she was in trouble. She needed help. Long blonde hair, windswept, thin hands shivering in the deep pockets of her coat, and the eyes, huge eyes of a marvelous shade of turquoise. Andrew seemed never to have seen such confused and sad eyes. He had to approach this stranger to find out what was wrong, or else he would scare her even more. After all, he was a man, and she, a fragile young girl, would probably be alarmed and think something bad. Andrew walked past. The supermarket was already sparsely populated. The man walked slowly through the rows. He put in the basket his daughter's favorite cereal, sausage and cheese, some fruit for himself. Then suddenly he saw a beautiful doll. She looked a lot like Hannah. Andrew smiled and put the pink box with the rest of his purchases. Maybe the toy would make her happy at least a little. Hannah hadn't laughed the whole time. Andrew thought about this girl, wondering if she would still be there when he left the store. The man hoped not, because the second time he would have to offer her help. Otherwise his conscience would get the better of him. And there was no telling what kind of story she had. I wouldn't want to get involved in anything, but Andrew's hopes were not realized. The girl was still sitting where she was. She gripped her shoulders with her hands, trying to stop the shivering. The stranger must have been freezing to the bone in her thin, wet coat. She must have been caught in the rain. It had rained just an hour and a half ago, a real deluge with hail of sorts. That's quite a situation. Andrew took a decisive step toward the girl and, trying to soften his tone as much as possible, asked her a question. "Are you all right?" The girl cast her wondering eyes down at him. There was clearly a look of surprise read in them, but yeah, sure. She's been sitting here for probably about an hour now, and Andrew was probably the first person to notice that she needed help. "It's okay," the stranger smiled. She turned out to have a very beautiful smile, genuine and kind. "I don't think you're telling me the truth," Andrew replied with a smile. "You see, when people are well, they don't sit alone in the supermarket shivering in the cold. Maybe you should call a cab. You obviously need to get home to warmth." "No, I'm at home." The girl lowered her head. How? Andrew wondered. His interlocutor didn't look homeless in any way. She looked well-groomed, and she was dressed well. "It's a long story. I'll be fine. I'll figure something out." Of course, after such an admission from a stranger, Andrew couldn't just walk away. He took a seat next to her on the curb and looked into her eyes. "You tell me a lot of time, so I'd love to hear your very long story." Andrew felt sorry for this young girl. What if someday his Hannah found herself in a difficult situation? She would need help and people would pass by indifferently. After all, this girl is someone's daughter too. Someone loves her, worries about her. All right, the stranger finally decided. "I guess I should introduce myself first. My name is Andrew," and Leslie began her story, which turned out to be a long one indeed. The girl grew up in the village in a large family. When the girl was 10 years old, her father died on a construction site, and the family began to face hard times. The head of the family used to fully provide for the family. By village standards, they lived very well, their own small household. The mother didn't work, was busy with the house and children. She had enough to do with a vegetable garden, chickens, 2 cows, and a goat. And then the woman was left alone with 5 children, the eldest of whom was little, and so it began. At first, it seemed that the family would manage to stay afloat. But soon it became obvious no, it wasn't going to work. The money was woefully short. We had to sell the animals, but the proceeds were not enough for long. Mother tried to work, but for some reason she didn't stay anywhere for long. And there were no suitable vacancies in the village. And somehow the woman started drinking. Apparently, when she got drunk, she forgot about what was weighing her down so much. The loss of a loved one, moneylessness, lack of work, need. The children were left to fend for themselves. The house was always dirty and uncomfortable now. Leslie, as the eldest, tried to keep order and bring up her younger siblings. But she was just a child herself. Looking at what was going on, Leslie was determined she didn't want to live like that. She'd have a different fate already. While her brothers and sisters rejoiced in freedom, as no one controls you, does not make you clean or prepare homework, Leslie studied. She realized that in order to make it in the people, she needed to get an education. And for that she would have to sweat. Leslie was praised at school, put the girl as an example to her classmates, and for good reason. Everyone knew in what conditions Leslie lives. And yet she managed to always look clean, tidy, and still on one studied. Toward the end of 9th grade, the girl decided on her future profession. She will become a teacher. She was good at getting along with children, especially with kids. She herself taught all her youngest to read and write, although they initially resisted. But Leslie managed to find an approach to everyone, and the girl also enjoyed looking after the children of neighbors. But not just watched that they did not climb anywhere, and taught them useful things. Those who are younger, colors and shapes; those who are older, letters and numbers. The children's parents were thrilled with the results. They paid the clever girl with food and sweets, and all as one said that she would make a wonderful teacher. Actually, the adults pushed Leslie on the idea of her future profession. Time flew by, and now Leslie received her red certificate with only A's on graduation. Teachers helped the girl to apply to teacher training college and got her a dormitory. There was no hope for Leslie's mother in this regard. She had completely lost her way, turned into a semblance of her old self. It was obvious to everyone that nothing could be done here. The younger children were placed in an orphanage. It was simply dangerous for them to stay with such a parent. At least Leslie used to look after them, but the girl needs to study. Leslie felt sorry for the younger siblings, but she realized that they would really be better off in the orphanage. There they would at least be fed and sent to school, and what awaits children at home? Hunger, cold, and dirt. Leslie had a new life. She gladly took up her studies. The girl was used to learning. She liked it to learn new things, to become smarter and more experienced. Soon she even became the best student of her course. She was again put as an example, but now already to her classmates. It was very pleasant. In the process of training, Leslie suddenly realized that she liked to work with difficult children, with ordinary children. It's easy. But the kids with special developmental needs, this is a more interesting task, and the results here bring great joy. That's why Leslie specifically asked for an internship at a remedial school. There she immediately found out that she knows how to find an approach even to the most difficult children. With her contacted children with very serious diagnoses to which even experienced specialists could not reach. You have a gift, no other way. Surprised the head of the educational institution, Leslie only smiled embarrassedly. She was different from childhood, modest and shy. That was her character. After graduating from college, Leslie was immediately hired at the very school where she was interning. The salary was pennies, but this money was still enough for food and rent a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't any kind of housing, but it was almost her own. By that time, Leslie's sisters had graduated from the orphanage. One of them had managed to get a profession as a seamstress. The other became a confectioner. Both immediately jumped into marriage. and quite successfully. Their husbands happened to be from out of town. Of course, they took their wives with them. Leslie was happy for her sister and a little surprised because they were younger than her, very young, almost still children, and already married ladies. Now you can not worry about them. The fate of the girls will turn out well. However, they will rarely see each other. After all, they are now separated by 1,000 kilometers. But that's not the main thing. The sisters now have husbands, have education, have jobs. You don't have to worry about them. And Leslie's 2 younger brothers have been adopted. Sam and Max, twins with hair the color of dried flax and piercing blue eyes. The boys came to the orphanage as young children. They were barely 8 years old. Beautiful as from a postcard, bright smiling, they were quickly taken into a family and driven out of town. Leslie didn't know where her brothers were. Now the secret of adoption, but in the orphanage she was told that their new parents are very good, wealthy people. So about the fate of the little brother can also not worry. The mother with her. During Leslie's college years, a tragic story happened during another party, which the mother regularly arranged in her empty house. One of the guests fell asleep with her over a cigarette stew. The wooden building burst into flames like a torch. Some of the guests managed to escape the burning building, but the mother and several others did not escape. Perhaps they were already deeply asleep and did not notice anything at all. It's scary to think what would have happened to the siblings if they hadn't ended up in an orphanage. So by her 20s, Leslie was left in this world for practically a day. No mother. Brothers and sisters have traveled to different corners of the vast homeland. Not even a home left for the girl. But Leslie was not discouraged. She had a desirable profession, her favorite job. It is hard, of course, alone, but she will cope. All the more so, she had her whole life ahead of her, and her love she will still meet, and her children will be born, and their apartment will be big and cozy. Leslie will never repeat her mother's fate. That's how the young girl lived in a rented apartment. She worked, went with her friends to the movies and attractions, engaged in self-education, read a lot of additional literature on the education of special children, and then age, perhaps, took its toll. One day Leslie realized that she couldn't and didn't want to be alone anymore. She needed someone near and dear to her, someone who cared about her and she would care about him too. How great it is to fall asleep and wake up next to a loved one, to talk with him on various topics, to support each other, to make plans for the future. Would Teddy have made such an impression on Leslie if he had met her at another time? Perhaps the girl fell in love with him so sincerely and wholeheartedly only because she was already ready to fall in love. She was waiting for it. And then the right candidate came along. Leslie thought about it for a long time afterward, but at the moment of meeting Teddy, such thoughts certainly didn't enter her head. Leslie was on her way back from a friend's birthday party. It was evening. The girl was in high spirits. They'd had a good time. They'd laughed a lot. The girls went to continue the holiday in the club. Leslie refused. She didn't like such places, noisy, crowded, and she didn't have much money left. She'd just have to make it to her next paycheck. Leslie had 2 important appliances out of order this month, a hair dryer and an electric kettle. Unforeseen expenses. Leslie looked lovely that night, and she knew it. Flowing, beautiful, tight-fitting, slim figure, sundress, loose hair, light makeup. The proof of the girl's attractiveness was the stares she felt on her. It was pleasant, though a little disconcerting. "Girl, you are so beautiful. Can I meet you?" The voice sounded from the side. Leslie turned around and met Teddy's eyes. She didn't know it was Teddy then, of course. She saw a great guy in front of her. Kind, open eyes of a beautiful hazel hue. There was a lot going on in them, and there was a light hanging in them, and interest and admiration. You could drown in those eyes, so you don't mind if I walk beside you for a bit. The boy looked questioningly at Leslie. No, the girl smiled. She really wanted that, to have a stranger walk her home. But at the same time, Leslie was embarrassed by her own desire. They walked through the park. Teddy told his new acquaintance jokes, shared some news, asked her questions about her life. He talked about himself too. Teddy was an easy and pleasant person, charming and relaxed. He had a good tongue. Leslie was immediately bought up by the sincerity with which the guy told about his own life, and she was sincere with him too. Teddy's honesty implied a reciprocal honesty. It turned out that Teddy and Leslie had a lot in common. Teddy too grew up in the village, and he too was the eldest in a large family. But he didn't know his father and didn't remember him. He asked his mother, of course, but she didn't seem to remember who had given her her firstborn. Leslie's mother had started drinking after her husband's death. Teddy's mother had been drinking for as long as the young man could remember. But Teddy, despite the lack of control and upbringing, still finished 9 classes because he understood without it, he will not achieve anything in life. And dreams and ambitions of the guy were always present. So having finished 9 grades, the boy went to the city. The average score of the certificate was not too high. But still, the boy was taken to the construction college. There was a shortage in one of the faculties. It was just luck. Teddy lived with his grandmother during his studies. She'd never been involved in her grandson's life before. She'd cut her failed daughter out of her life, as if at first tried to pull her out of the swamp, but realizing that it was useless, eliminated. But the eldest grandson did not drive away. She welcomed him warmly. She gave him a separate room and even provided him with money at first. Until Teddy found a part-time job. The boy started working early. Life made him do it. While still living with his mother in the village, he mowed grass for someone, helped to paste wallpaper, painted fences for neighbors. They didn't pay much, but there was enough milk for bread. Sometimes there was also enough for sweets. If the boy had not taken care of himself, it is not known whether he would have survived or not, because there was no hope for his mother. He was not interested in anything but the bottle. In the city, there were much more opportunities for part-time work, especially for the management and not afraid of difficulties, student of construction college. So many construction sites and everywhere need helpers ready to do low-skilled work. And the pay was pretty good by Teddy's standards. When I was in college, my little sisters were taken away to an orphanage. Teddy shook his head sadly. Some of the neighbors complained to the guardianship office. And they did the right thing. The girls would have been lost with their mother. I wanted to file a report myself, but I couldn't make up my mind. I thought maybe it was wrong. Teddy visited his sisters in the orphanage, brought them sweets, coloring books, asked about their life. The girls told me that everything was fine, but they still missed their mother despite her attitude to them. And then one day I came and found out that the girls had been taken away to a family. I never saw them again. Maybe we'll meet again someday. Life is long. Leslie couldn't believe her ears. Teddy's story was exactly like her own. By the way, the boy listening to her story was also surprised and looked at her as if she were his own. He even hugged her a few times. And this gesture was so warm and natural that Leslie was not even embarrassed. And then Teddy's grandmother died, and the boy found himself on the street because numerous relatives hustled up and sued the apartment for themselves. Teddy and his mom got nothing. It happens. Not only did the guy lost a family man to whom he had already managed to become very attached, but he also had a heavy load of domestic problems. He had to make amends, and Teddy steadfastly and very honorably withstood the next test. The guy got a full-time job because the money from part-time work would not be enough to rent even the cheapest housing and groceries, and there was only a year left to go to college. It was a difficult period for Teddy. Hard work on the construction site plus studying at night. He had to make it up to keep up with his lectures and keep his job. Teddy was running back and forth. He lost weight. The kid barely slept for months before he got his degree. But he got through it, made it through. But now all I have is a job. Teddy smiled. It's much easier than combining work and study. When I think back to that time, Teddy worked and rented an apartment, just living. Everything seemed to work out well for him, given his background. Time flew by as we talked, and now they were at Leslie's house. The girl was even annoyed. Wow, how fast they got here. I don't think our meeting is accidental, seriously, said Teddy. I've only known you for a little while, but I already feel like you're no stranger to me. Leslie smiled. She had the exact same feeling. Teddy, he was so understanding, so strong, so kind and good. She didn't want to part with him at all. I'll pick you up tomorrow. Okay, Teddy asked. We'll go for a walk somewhere. I'll show you my favorite places in town. I'm sure you don't know about any of them. So how would you like that? Of course, Leslie didn't mind. You bet. The young people exchanged phone numbers and hugged goodbye. Teddy did not dare to kiss the girl at that time. It happened a little later, during the very first date they had agreed on. It's an evening of getting to know each other. Leslie couldn't get enough of Teddy. she finally had a boyfriend. And what a guy! In any company, he immediately became his own, thanks to his innate talent for making people laugh. Teddy knew and could do so many things, and of course, he had a lot of friends. They would call him every now and then and ask him to go out. And Teddy would tell them he couldn't because he was out with his girlfriend. Leslie immediately felt very important and significant for the guy, and this feeling filled her heart with warmth. The young people moved in together quickly. Both felt that it would be more profitable for both of them. They didn't want to part after their outings anyway. Renting one apartment was much cheaper than renting two. Teddy moved in with Leslie because his apartment was in a remote area, and it was easier for both of them to get to their workplaces. Teddy turned out to be a good housekeeper. He could cook dinner, fix a screen, and paste wallpaper. Not a single detail escaped his attentive eye. The guy immediately saw the shortcomings and tried to eliminate them. True, during the time of living together, some details became clear. Teddy could not live without his friends. They often called and met somewhere. After such meetings, Teddy always came, but not that drunk, but clearly drunk. It scared Leslie. She remembered what had happened to her mother because of her love of booze, and Teddy's parents were no better. Maybe Teddy would turn out the same way. But the boy only laughed when Leslie shared her worries with him. "Don't worry, I won't repeat my mother's mistakes. I have an example in front of me. That's definitely not going to happen to me." Leslie repeatedly asked Teddy to take her to her friends' houses with her, or to invite these people to their house. The girl wanted to meet the people who were important to her lover, but for some reason, Teddy didn't want those meetings. You see, it's just guys out there. We have our own things to do, our own jokes and conversations. And here you are, a girl tender, fragile. You can't even say a bad word in front of you. And what if someone takes a fancy to you? They'll steal you away. I wouldn't want that. Leslie smiled. She was pleased with Teddy's explanation. Still, he spent too much time with his friends and too often came home like this. The cloudy eyes, the wobbly gait, the odd wandering smile on his lips. This condition frightened Leslie. Several years passed like that. Leslie and Teddy lived together. The young people became almost a family. At first, the girl dreamed that they were about to get married and, like everyone else, start planning children. The prospects were breathtaking. But those hopes were not destined to come true. Teddy was changing. Maybe he'd always been like that. It was just that Leslie looked at her chosen one through rose-colored glasses and didn't notice his faults. And in general, at first Teddy showed his best qualities, trying to charm Leslie. He knew what would attract a girl like Leslie. Teddy disappeared more and more with his friends. Leslie waited for him nights, worried about what could happen to him on the street at such a time. Moreover, several times Teddy had already come home beaten up. Teddy often came home drunk. It happened. In the morning, he'd collapse on the couch and start singing loudly. He only had a couple hours to get ready for work. Naturally, Teddy was not able to work after nighttime drinking, and accordingly, problems with work began. No employer wants a person who can't be relied upon, who would like an employee who can easily oversleep and not show up at the construction site at the right time. Once or twice can still be tolerated. It's not a big deal what kind of situations people have, but when it happened over and over again, Teddy got fired. The periods when the guy was out of work and out of money got worse and longer. During this time, Teddy was supported by Leslie. She paid the rent, she bought groceries, and she also gave him pocket money. He asked for it. The girl couldn't say no. Leslie felt sorry for Teddy. Moreover, every time he repented so sincerely and convincingly assured that it happened for the last time. He planned to get his mind right, explained his attachment to the bottle as a result of a difficult childhood. But how can you not feel sorry for someone like that? It gets better. Teddy wasn't just changing outwardly, he was changing inwardly. He became aggressive. Now the guy could easily yell at Leslie, call her names. Most of the fights were about money. Teddy demanded not such large sums, but Leslie's salary was small. It was barely enough for the bare necessities. Teddy, he just drank the girl's paycheck. Leslie couldn't even afford to go out with the girls once a month, and Teddy hung out at the joint almost every day. He and his buddies took turns throwing banquets. When it was Teddy's turn, he'd ask Leslie for money. He hadn't worked in years. Why would he? He was doing pretty well for himself. Leslie, of course, had long hoped for a miracle. She believed that she could, with her love and attention, pull Teddy out of the swamp, which was dragging him more and more. The girl offered him to go to the movies, dragged him out for a walk in the evening, tried to find him a job. It was all to no avail. A couple of times Leslie wanted to leave Teddy, even packed her things. But Teddy, seeing this, immediately began almost tearfully begging her to stay. "I can't handle it. I really can't. I love you so much. I'll be lost without you. You'll see, I won't be able to live." Leslie sighed and stayed. She really felt that Teddy would be lost without her. She was very angry with her husband's friends. They were the ones Leslie blamed for what was happening to Teddy. Teddy was such a good guy. That's the kind of guy Leslie fell in love with. But unfortunately, Teddy has fallen into bad company, imaginary company. His friends are dragging him down. Time passed, but Leslie did not see changes for the better. The girl suffered a lot. It is necessary to meet his love and again lose a loved one because of an addiction to drinking. Well, it was not her destiny. Living with Teddy was getting harder and harder. He wasn't working at all anymore, not even a coven like he used to. He was taking money from Leslie. She had to go grocery shopping on her way home on payday. She also transferred the rent to the landlord at once because her card was immediately in the hands of Teddy, who waited impatiently for the day X. And that would be it. No more money. Leslie tried to argue. Of course, she wouldn't give Teddy the card, explaining to him that it was wrong, but then he'd lose his temper, start screaming, smashing everything around him, calling Leslie all kinds of names. His eyes blazed with rage. Leslie was afraid of Teddy at such times, even though he never laid a finger on her. He hadn't yet. Why do you need him like that? Her friends wondered, who were aware of what was going on. Throw him out of the house and let him live the way he wants. If only it were that simple. First of all, Leslie still felt sorry for Teddy and loved him. She was not indifferent to the fate of the guy. Moreover, Leslie even felt responsible for him. Secondly, the girl was elementary afraid. She realized Teddy wouldn't go anywhere, and if Leslie ran away from him, Teddy would chase her. He was getting more and more aggressive. It's just not safe to make someone like that angry. Leslie saw that both Teddy's behavior and her own life were getting worse, but she didn't see any way out of the situation, so she accepted everything as it was. She even tried to justify Teddy, but he didn't beat her. He loved her, and he loved her sincerely. He was cursing when she was going to leave him, and then came that night, that dreadful November evening. Leslie came home early. Today was a short day at the remedial school. The superintendent was celebrating her anniversary. Leslie returned in high spirits. She had received a bonus as one of the best workers. Pennies, of course, like her salary, but still nice, yes. Leslie's paycheck was small, but she liked the work itself. She knew how to deal with special kids. Leslie enjoyed the success of her little students. Each girl looked for an approach, and it was even interesting. But unfortunately, the work in the state agency paid not too generous. Leslie was offered to move to work in a private developmental center. The money promised not bad, but the girl, she could not leave the students who were so drawn to her. Among them were those who did not contact anyone else at all. So for the time being, Leslie was hesitant. So the girl came home early. Teddy was sitting in the kitchen, already far from sober. Leslie was tired. The week had not been easy, and there were mountains of dirty dishes, ashes scattered on the table, crumbs on the floor and things scattered around the room in a mess. Teddy's things. Leslie felt herself starting to get angry. "Teddy, what kind of pigsty have you created here?" "What pigsty?" The guy looked around the kitchen with a cloudy look. "Clean up after yourself. You need to clean it up now. You clean it up," Teddy said and reached for another cigarette. "She's gonna boss me around. I've been at work all day. I'm tired. And you're sitting at home. I don't even require you to cook, though I could. At least you can clean up after yourself." Leslie realized too late that she'd made a mistake by getting drunk with the man. She hadn't expected such a reaction from Teddy. Yes, he could yell, call her hurtful words in response to a remark. But this time, it was different. The guy suddenly grabbed his knife and moved toward Leslie. His eyes burned with malicious fire. "You bitch, I'm so sick of you. Always buzzing around my ear like a pesky fly. Teddy, what are you doing? Put the knife down." Leslie reached for the door in fear. Teddy obeyed and flung the knife away. It fell to the tiled kitchen floor. The guy came up and hit her right in the face so hard that the girl couldn't stay on her feet. She hadn't realized Teddy was so strong. Her cheek immediately flared as if it had been burned by a flame. Tears sprang from her eyes. Fear still gripped Leslie's heart with an icy hand. Teddy was capable of anything now. The girl realized it, saw it in his eyes. Been wanting to do this for a long time. Teddy smirked. It's going to happen now, in my opinion. Got it. You won't be opening your mouth at me anymore. Leslie nodded her head. She now understood perfectly well it was impossible to argue with Teddy. He was capable of anything. As if to confirm his words, the boy came up to Leslie and pushed her so hard that she hit her head against the wall. Then Teddy kicked the girl in the back. It must have been a pretty weak kick, but a sharp pain immediately spilled all over her body. No, who's the boss of the house? You'll get more next time, Teddy said, and went back into the bedroom. Naturally, Leslie didn't wait for another time. She realized it was dangerous to stay in the apartment with Teddy. He might even send her to the grave. His eyes were cloudy, half crazy. He was not the man Leslie had once loved. She stood up, waited until she was no longer dizzy, and slipped out the door. She didn't even take her things. She only grabbed the bag she hadn't had time to take off her shoulder. It contained her cell phone, her papers, the essentials. The rest was just a matter of time. The important thing was to get away from Teddy. He's a scary man, a monster, and Teddy is capable of hurting her, maiming her. Even more than that, the girl has never been so afraid for her life. Leslie hurried down the stairs, fearing to hear the footsteps of an angry Teddy behind her. He doesn't think Leslie is capable of such a thing, to run away, but where can she go in the middle of the night? She has no relatives, no money either. Of course, Teddy will be furious when he finds it missing. Leslie wanted to be as far away from home as possible at that moment. The girl popped out into the cold November evening. In what she was wearing, a light coat, uncomfortable heeled half boots. It was cold, dark, uncomfortable. Leslie flew forward and without seeing the road. To keep warm, the girl jumped on the first bus that came along, so she had time to catch her breath. A warm cabin, a soft chair, cheerful quiet music, a minimum of passengers. Leslie looked at the cityscapes flickering outside the window and thought about where to go. Nothing came to mind. Yes, Leslie had friends, Ashley from work and a former classmate, Susie, but both were married. They both had husbands, kids. I didn't want to embarrass them. Leslie started calling local hotels. As luck would have it, all the rooms were booked. What should we do? Of course, said the strict woman conductor, interrupting Leslie's frantic attempts to find a place to sleep. The girl inhaled and stepped out of the cozy cabin. A cold rain had begun to fall on the unsightly evening. Leslie's coat was immediately soaked through. The girl was completely frozen. Then she saw a supermarket in the distance, a place where she could wait out the downpour and think calmly about her situation. There must be a way out, and Leslie would find it. She would just have to hide from the rain first. But I've been sitting here ever since. Leslie looked at Andrew as if awaiting his verdict. I think we should report him to the police. I can tell you've never been in this situation before. Leslie smiled. But the cops will come, and they'll see Teddy's already quite calm and adequate. My words mean nothing to them. There's no sign of a beating. The police will leave, and I'll be alone with Teddy. What do you think he'll do to me after that? Andrew shook his head. Yes, Leslie is of course completely right. Teddy would get away with it. Leslie, don't you have anywhere to go? No, the girl sighed sadly. Don't think anything bad of it. I want to offer you a place to sleep at my place. I have a big house. My daughter and I live there alone. You'll sleep, and then you'll decide what to do next. What do they say? The morning is the wiser in the evening. I'm so sorry to embarrass you, but I really have nowhere to go. That's the truth. So I'll go along with it. Andrew realized it was a strange, risky decision to let a complete stranger into the house. Except he couldn't leave the girl in the lurch. She really needs help. Nothing bad would happen if Leslie slept over. Hannah's nanny looked up in surprise as Andrew let her walk ahead of him into the house. But she didn't say anything. She was a professional of her trade and knew perfectly well not to meddle in the personal affairs of her employers. Hannah's asleep in her room, the nanny reported. I wanted to wait for you, but you were very late today. Thank you very much, and I apologize for the delay. Of course you will be compensated For those hours, I'm sure they will. Nanny smiled. You are always very generous. Andrew showed Leslie to the guest room. The girl looked around in surprise. It was probably the first time she had ever been in such an environment. High ceilings, wide staircase, stylish interior. And you and your daughter live here alone? She asked. Yes, just the two of us. Excuse me. But where's the girl's mom? She's gone. Andrew sighed. He had long since gotten used to this question. Many people were surprised that the father was raising his daughter alone. Make yourself comfortable. Take a hot shower. You need to warm up. The refrigerator is down there. Grab whatever you want. There are clean robes in the guest bedroom. All in all, make yourself at home. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience. No worries at all. Andrew smiled. The important thing is that you have a good ending. Andrew headed off to his room. On the way, he looked into Hannah's bedroom. The girl was sleeping sweetly under the covers with a hand under her cheek. Her hair was sprawled across the pillow. A light blush played on her cheeks. A nightlight glowed faintly on the nightstand. As always, Hannah was afraid to stay in the dark. Andrew took a quick shower, changed into his pajamas, and laid his head back on the pillow with pleasure. How tired he was today. It was a little strange to realize that there was a stranger in the house right now, a complete stranger. But to Leslie, she was just a confused girl in a difficult situation. Leslie wasn't lying. Andrew could feel it. By his age, he'd learned to be a pretty good judge of character. Andrew woke up from an unusual sound, looked at the clock. Almost 4:00. What's wrong? The alarm clock was still hours away from ringing. What had woken him up? It was a soft, gentle singing, something subtly familiar, even native. Andrew lifted himself up and listened. Singing, it sounded like it was coming from Hannah's bedroom. What the hell was that? And then it hit Andrew. He remembered that Leslie, the hard-luck girl he'd picked up from the supermarket, was sleeping in the house tonight. The man jumped up and rushed into Hannah's bedroom. Why was this girl sneaking into his daughter's room? What was on her mind? Andrew was about to rush into the nursery and give his guest a thorough interrogation, but he was stopped by a tinkling baby voice. One more time. One more time. My mom used to sing it to me. Okay, Leslie said, and she started singing again. Andrew peered cautiously through the gap between the wall and the ajar door to the bedroom. An idyllic picture appeared before his eyes. Hannah was lying in her crib, looking up at Leslie with a smile. His little girl was smiling, and his guest was sitting nearby in a high chair. She stroked the girl's head, looked at her fondly, and sang a lullaby. Andrew remembered the song now. Alice had indeed sung it to little Hannah. But how had the little girl memorized it? She wasn't even 2 years old then. Leslie was singing. Andrew looked at her and at his daughter and could not understand. Had he just heard Hannah talking to Leslie, or was he just imagining it? No, the girl clearly said a few sentences and asked Leslie to sing the songs again, and said it was the lullaby her mom used to sing. The man's heart was pounding at a frantic pace. He forbade himself to hope that Hannah had actually spoken moments ago. Most likely he had just imagined it. The man realized it was impossible to burst into the room now and disrupt this. He waited patiently by the door, hoping to hear Leslie and Hannah's dialogue again. But that's it, baby. Time for bed? Leslie smiled. Good night. Hannah said clearly. Andrew again could barely keep from sighing loudly, and in surprise, just don't you go. I'll see you tomorrow, won't I? Yeah, I'll see you. Leslie walked out of the bedroom, quietly closing the door behind her, and ran into Andrew. Oh, we woke you up. The girl became agitated. Sorry, didn't mean to just. The girl screamed in her sleep. She was having a bad dream. I ran to comfort her out of habit. That's what I always do with my students. But then you started singing her a song. Hannah liked it. How did you know her name was Hannah? I didn't tell you that. How? Said Leslie, surprised. The girl told me herself. We met her. Let's go into the living room. I have a serious conversation to have with you. Okay. Leslie flapped her eyes in confusion. She couldn't understand what was going on. In the living room, Andrew slowly, thoroughly told the guest the story of Hannah. He had to mention his wife's death and the girl's many diagnoses. You see, ever since Alice died, Hannah hasn't spoken a word, and now all of a sudden, she's talking. And I didn't realize the girl was speechless. She got in touch with me as soon as she heard the lullaby. She said her mom used to sing that song to her. Wow. The poor child still remembers it, although she seemed to be quite tiny at the time. "I have a suggestion for you, since you have such a favorable influence on Hannah. You're also a teacher. You have experience with special children. Could you be a nanny or a teacher for my girl? You have nowhere to live, and here you will have your own room. I won't begrudge you a salary." Wow, this is so unexpected. I'd love to be a nanny for Hannah, but I have a job. I can't leave my students, you know. "I see. You don't have to sit with her all day. The main thing is to come here after work, socialize with Hannah on the weekends, maybe do some activities with her or just walk around. Naturally, if you need time to yourself, that's not even negotiable." At any moment, Andrew was willing to do anything to keep Leslie close to Hannah. That girl had worked a real miracle. But what if she suddenly disappeared and his girl went silent again? What if Leslie leaving her would be a new stressor for her? Leslie stayed at Andrew's house. She turned out to be a very smiling and friendly girl. Hannah just couldn't get enough of her new nanny, or as she called her friend. Leslie always knew what to do to entertain her. They drew together, molded with plasticine, even embroidered. Hannah was talking now. Andrew couldn't believe it. Strangely enough, Hannah's speech, the little girl, turned out to be very literate, developed. It turns out that all this time she was learning unnoticed from others, absorbed everything like a sponge, and now quietly built beautiful and long friends. And it also turned out that Hannah is an incredibly capable girl. She has a talent for the exact sciences, Leslie said repeatedly. "She'll make a great physicist or mathematician. You'll see." Leslie was a little wrong. Hannah turned out to be a promising computer programmer. When in the 5th grade she started computer science, the girl immediately demonstrated outstanding talents. The teacher, of course, could not fail to notice it. She immediately began to send a capable student to Olympiads of various levels, and almost always the girl returned with awards. Andrew could not be pleased with his daughter. He was very grateful to Leslie because it was thanks to her talent, or rather even the gift of communicating with special children, that Hannah began to speak. Leslie leaned in. She assured him that Hannah was not her client. She didn't have any serious diagnoses or disabilities, just stress. That's how she reacted to losing her mother. It had nothing to do with me. She would have talked sooner or later on her own. Andrew didn't agree with Leslie on that. He knew for sure, if it hadn't been for her, his girl would have had to go to a special school for kids with serious mental health problems. And then what would Hannah be like now? By the time Hannah started winning her first awards as a young programmer, Andrew and Leslie were already married. Yes, that's what happened. Andrew and Leslie lived side by side. At first, all their conversations revolved solely around Hannah, and then somehow, gradually, it became clear to both of them that something was going on between them. They were attracted to each other. It was pointless to deny it. By the way, it was not without Hannah's participation. The clever girl saw everything, understood everything, and was very happy about it. It was she who pushed her father to make the first step. One day she told him directly that it was time to ask Leslie on a date. "I can see you both need a date." Hannah, then 10, smiled slyly. "Come on, take her to the movies already. Do you mind?" "Why would I mind? On the contrary, I'm all for it. Just next time we'll all go out together somewhere." So, with Hannah's encouragement, Leslie and Andrew started dating. And then more. Soon it became obvious to both of them that they were literally meant for each other. So they got married. Quiet, modest, but very beautiful and somehow cozy. Hannah now had a little sister, Chris. She's 2 years old now. She is very perky and quick, just like her big sister at her age. By the way, it was Hannah who chose the name for the baby. She adored her little sister, didn't socialize with her, taught her everything, dressed up the little girl as a doll, and even boasted about it in front of her many friends. Andrew is happy. He has a favorite loving wife and 2 wonderful daughters, healthy, beautiful, smart. They have a close-knit family where everyone loves and supports each other. Leslie and Hannah, they are like girlfriends in general. It is so nice to watch them when they do something together, cooking, discussing plans for tomorrow, choosing outfits for. Sometimes the man wondered what would have happened to him, and Hannah, if he hadn't met Leslie at the supermarket, or if he'd just passed by as he'd intended at first. Perhaps it was fate itself after all. Victoria stood next to the high panoramic window and thoughtfully looked into the distance. There, where in the depths of her and her husband's large and flowering garden, there was a small, beautiful lake in which huge rainbow carp slowly swam. "Here, look how handsome they are," he said, hugging her. "Jack, they were bought especially for you, so that you could come here at any time and watch our family in miniature." Jack smiled and pointed out to the young woman a pair of beautiful fish moving smoothly under the glass-smooth water column. "Look, the bigger one is like me," the husband continued. "But this beauty with iridescent sides is you, Victoria, his female, his legal wife. You see how happy they are, just like you and me, Victoria." Then for a long time, I looked at the majestic Pisces and thought that she too was now floating in the same way in the middle of the unknown of her own life. And just like these carps, it does not remember itself. The woman slowly shifted her focus from her gaze to the reflection in the window. Tall, almost model height, slender like a tree trunk, Victoria, she had truly beautiful appearance. The platinum blonde, who turned 25 last year, looks like she stepped straight out of the pages of a fashion magazine. However, Jackie said, that's how they met. Like she was a model who was about to finally leave the business that was boring her, and he was a successful banker who managed several branches of one of the largest banks in the country. The husband told her that they met at some art exhibition, either dedicated to Impressionism or vice versa. It was something related to folk crafts. Jackie told her that he didn't remember exactly. "I would like to remember at least something from all this," I thought to myself with bitterness. However, no matter how much the businessman's wife strained her memory, no matter how much she tried to reconstruct the events of that fateful day when she was in a terrible car accident and almost completely lost her memory, nothing I couldn't remember other than my name. Her first memory, after she finally came to her senses, was the long road home. The woman remembered the cozy interior of an expensive car in which her husband drove her to their luxurious country mansion, located in one of the most closed and carefully guarded cottage communities. Next to her in the car sat a middle-aged woman, dressed in a chic three-piece sky blue suit. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup could have been the envy of the Queen of England herself. The lady looked to be about 50, but she had a figure like that of Hollywood star. It fit, slender, with a minimum number of wrinkles on a beautiful but slightly cold face. It later turned out that it was the mother Jack, Zoe. The banker's mother owned a large spa complex, so in matters of youth and beauty, she really had no equal, at least in their city. After they arrived home, Jack with Zoe told her in more detail about what happened to her, meaning it's normal that you feel a little lost. Her husband explained to her, "The accident you and your driver got into was simply monstrous. The driver died on the spot. And Jack, he hesitated as if it was hard for him to talk about it, and he did not know how to choose the right words so as not to shock his already confused wife. Finally, he said, "They literally put you back together piece by piece. Your brain was severely damaged, and after doctors performed several complex operations, you had to be put into an artificial coma. Otherwise, you simply wouldn't have survived, my dear." Zoe, who was sitting right there, just silently lowered her eyes and put her palm to her forehead, as if she herself suddenly felt bad from the surge of worries for her daughter-in-law. "You were in a coma for almost 6 months, she said quietly. "My son visited you every day in the hope that your condition would finally improve enough to wake you up. However, at first the doctors did not give positive prognoses. They said that the chances of making it through were simply, and you could, Victoria. You have conquered death. Well done." When Zoe Konstantinovna looked again at Victoria, there were tears in her eyes. She immediately approached her daughter-in-law and sincerely hugged her. Victoria, there was no choice but to respond to this gesture with a much less tight hug of his "I've been waiting for you so much." "Victoria," said meanwhile Jack, and he also wiped tears from the corners of his eyes. "You just can't imagine how long I've been waiting. Mom says it right. Even the doctors despaired, but I still believed that you would come back to me. Honey, thank God, that's what happened. Now you are home, and I will never let you suffer again." The young woman looked at her husband, and for a tiny moment, it suddenly seemed to her that she had already heard something like that. But it was under completely different circumstances, and which ones, alas, she did not remember at all. She herself felt as if she had slept for several decades in a row. And when she woke up, she found herself in a completely different time and place than where she had once fallen asleep. The woman was haunted by a constant feeling of lethargy and physical weakness, and everything around her seemed somehow completely different from what it should have been. "Thank you. Thanks to both of you," answered slowly Victoria. And the mother-in-law finally released her from her too strong. The young woman smiled faintly and added to her husband, "I must be very lucky to have such a sensitive and caring family. I will try to remember you and everything that happened before this terrible accident." Zoe, son, and I quickly looked at each other, but the next second a happy smile flashed on the face of the husband and mother-in-law. "Of course, darling," the woman sang, taking her hand. "We have no doubt about it. Jack will help you fill in all the gaps that have formed in your memory. That's right, dear me. And you and our Jack. We all live together in this wonderful house. I'll keep an eye on you if you don't mind," she said, looking carefully at her daughter-in-law. "Jack, we are at work all day. In addition, he is often sent on business trips, including abroad. I think it will be better this way." Victoria turned a questioning glance from her to her husband, and he confirmed his mother's words. "Darling, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. I'm taking some time off now, but I'll have to go back to the office in a couple of weeks. I want to be absolutely sure that nothing happens to you while I'm not home. To be honest, we have already prepared a little for this. So once you are completely ready to start, just tell us, do you live?" and asked unexpectedly, "Do you live with us?" The mother-in-law was taken aback for a moment, as if she did not expect such tactlessness from her daughter-in-law. But then, realizing that this was just an ordinary question, Zoe softened. The husband nevertheless embellished the true words somewhat, Zoe, and her attitude one way or another. But then she did not say anything, but only gave her loved ones another weak smile. She is really very tired, and the only thing she really wanted at that moment was just to get some sleep. Related Victoria did not resist the desire of Victoria and took her to the room designated for her. "Mom kindly agreed to help me with this, although her worries are beyond the roof. I'm sure you and Mom will have a great time together. Even before the accident, you were inseparable. Real girlfriends." Jack laughed a low, pure laugh while looking at his mother as if he was looking for her support. She didn't keep herself waiting, and Zoe laughed too. "Of course, you and I will discuss so many things. We will prepare so many delicious. You won't be bored with me, that's for sure." Mother-in-law patted softly Victoria on the hand, but it seemed to her that the woman did this too faintly, as if talking about their friendship. She wore a gorgeous designer dress the color of baked milk, completely embroidered with silk and silver crystals that folded into a whimsical and slightly reminiscent of Scandinavian patterns. "You are so beautiful here." Kissing his wife, he whispered to Jack. I just gently dodged. She was not yet ready to get closer to her husband the way he would like. Too little time had passed, and she had not yet had time to get used to him again or feel the feelings that had connected them, as he claimed, for 3 long years. Almost a year has passed since that moment. But the young woman has not advanced one iota in her numerous attempts to remember life before the moment of the accident. It's as if someone deliberately separated these two halves with an invisible line, and everything that came before was irretrievably lost. Her husband helped her as best he could, showing her a wedding album, which contained many photographs of both the celebration itself and afterwards. From their everyday life, here they are, happy and incredibly beautiful, posing for a photographer, surrounded by 24 friends. Victoria, "No, Jack, please, I can't. I'm sorry," she said quietly, Victoria. But the husband did not seem to hear this, continuing to try to establish closer communication with his wife. He tried to hug her, but the woman pulled away, more insistent. "Okay," he said dryly. "But did you remember anything? And you can't hide from me forever. After all, I am your husband. You don't need to be afraid of me. Maybe if we started living together again. As before, you would quickly be able not only to remember, but also to feel for me the same love that I feel for you every day. But I love you." He answered her stupidly, slightly upset Jack. By his face, the woman realized that he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time, and now all he could do was look back at their wedding photos in disappointment. "That's what I thought," said the husband in a much colder tone. "Sometimes it seems to me that you don't even try to remember anything. I understand this is hard for you, but you could just try to trust me and your mom, since your memory still doesn't want to come back to you. Look at your right hand. Victoria felt bad at heart. She really wanted all those wonderful, sublime feelings he spoke about to return to her memory. Jack, but looking at the multicolored photographs, she felt absolutely nothing for anyone, even the slightest glimpse of memory. Victoria, she was terribly ashamed, so she could, you see, I gave you this ring on the day I proposed to you. You were happy to receive it. So happy that she immediately told me yes. Victoria, she obediently stared at her right hand, where her wedding ring with a huge pink diamond was on her ring finger. Jackie caught her glance and nodded curtly. Please let me finish, he said, and a mournful expression instantly spread across his face. You don't remember now, but you and I have always been part of one whole. We loved each other so much that we even wrote special vows for each other for our wedding. Jackie looked for something in my wife's toilet cabinet and took out a large envelope. Inside was a sheet of coated paper neatly folded in half. On the sheet of paper was a love letter typed on a typewriter, in which Victoria explained her feelings to her future husband. Jack, she tried to justify herself, but her husband motioned for her to shut up. With these words, the man left his wife's room, leaving her alone with the wedding vows and his far from rosy thoughts. Here, read this carefully, her husband asked. If this doesn't bring back even a little memory of how happy we were, then I'm asking. No, I'm begging you, just take my word for it. I love you more than anything in the world, and it will always be that way. Victoria read the message to my husband and cried. She cried because she couldn't remember either how she wrote it or what she felt. The oath was truly beautiful, so pure, so sincere. Lord, why? I don't remember any of this. I asked both myself and God the same question. Why can't I love my husband again and remember? Her mother-in-law's advice didn't help either. Although they cooked together in the spacious kitchen and went out into the city together to visit the places that, as she assured her, Zoe loved most of all, it was all useless. Inside Victoria was as if there was a huge stone wall that did not allow her to look into the depths of her own memory and remember everything. Wherein Victoria, she was not left alone for a minute. Either her mother-in-law or herself was always with her. Jack, my husband and I went to the city to unwind a couple of times a week. There they went shopping and to restaurants. Or Jack tried to spend time with his wife, visiting theaters, cinema, and exhibitions. She was very grateful to her husband for his work, but did not understand why she could not do everything the same, but on her own, without his. The woman wanted a little freedom, personal space. She hoped unsuccessfully that if she could be alone with her thoughts, then her memory might return to her much faster. No, honey, that's impossible. Repeated to her over and over again, Jack. You are still too weak and cannot fully control yourself. What if you get some kind of dizziness? Or, God forbid, will you completely lose consciousness and fall into a coma again? Darling, I won't survive this. You know, but I'll still have to go out in public alone sooner or later. You can't lock me in our house forever. Just thinking about it immediately made me shudder. She suddenly realized that, it turns out, she couldn't stand closed spaces and loneliness. Jack, but seeing his wife's reaction to his words, he instantly became nervous with irritation. The corner of his eye even twitched. What's happened, Dew? Did you remember something? He asked somehow strangely. No, she answered. Why are you asking? The husband immediately relaxed noticeably and said more softly, I thought you felt something new. Maybe she remembered how you and I already argued in a similar way. Victoria shook her head negatively. Oh, not really, but you're right. I realized that I couldn't be alone for too long. Then something seemed to push the woman from within, and she looked carefully at her husband, Jack, and why during all this time, none of my friends ever called me. Do I have no friends? The phone number you gave me. There is no one in the contact list except you and Zoe. What about my parents? Where are they, Jack? There were so many questions that Jack involuntarily began to walk around the room where they were talking. It was just one of those evenings when they were planning to go to the premiere of the Capitol's play, which was touring their city. The man noticeably perked up and kept tugging at his cuffs in excitement, pretending to adjust his emerald cufflinks. What is it, dear? I didn't understand, Victoria. Is there something you haven't told me yet? Jack, I will not leave here until I find out the whole truth. Jackie looked nervously at his wife, and in her soul there was an unpleasant feeling, a feeling that they were clearly hiding something from her. It's just that you've chosen the wrong time for this conversation, he finally said. Jack, we're going to the theater now, and you're here about your parents and friends. Let's talk later. I felt a sudden attack of anger and irritation. She stomped her foot hard on the carpet. But I want to know, have pity on me. I've been living in the dark for a year now and don't know who I am or what I am. I didn't ask because I thought it would be too hard for me and because I thought I would remember everything on my own. But nothing works. I don't know what to do next, how to get my memory back. Victoriashi felt herself begin to shake. She was clearly starting to get hysterical. And my husband, fortunately, also understood this. Jack jumped up to Victoria and hugged her tightly, trying to warm her and calm her trembling. It was like a stretched ringing string. She couldn't control her own body. He stroked his wife on the... That's what I was talking about. It's too early for you to be alone. I was hoping you could remember bits and pieces of the main thing. Her man sat her down on the bed and said in a soft but sad voice, your parents, they died long ago. It was a hiking accident. Your mom and dad were mountain lovers and often kayaked in wild river areas. One day their boat couldn't withstand one of the rapids and capsized. She looked at her husband with red eyes from tears. Did they drown? He nodded sadly and stroked Victoria on the cheek. The river was very cold, and in those places the current was very strong. Their death was inevitable. I'm sorry, honey, I'm so sorry. Victoria burst into tears and buried her face in her husband's shoulder. Lord, what a nightmare. Oh, how long ago did this happen? Oh, a long time ago, honey. You were only 20 then. You told me about it yourself. Jack stroked his wife's head and whispered soothing words into her ear. Then he said carefully, I bought you a new phone because your previous one was broken during an accident. There are no other contacts in it, since I didn't want anyone to bother you again during your rehabilitation. Victoriashi calmed down a little and, wiping her tears, exactly. But I didn't even think about it. I'm sorry, Jack. I am very ashamed that I could think badly of you. I really decided that you wanted to hide something from me. The husband just smiled affectionately and suggested, if you want to meet your friends, then so be it. I'll tell them your new number. But just be sure to stay in touch. When I walk, I need to know that you're okay, you know. Nodded. This news made her feel a little lighter. Well, that's nice, the husband said contentedly. You know, I changed my mind about going to the theater today. I think we've had enough emotions for this evening. Let me give you the sedative the doctor prescribed, and then we'll go to bed early. Is that okay? I thought about it and agreed. She really is very emotional about you. The husband assured her that he was not at all offended by his wife's suspicion. Like, he understands everything. Still, living without a past is such stress. Having given my wife an injection, Jack breathed out a sigh of relief when she fell into a blissful sleep within a few minutes. That evening, he realized for the first time that he was with Victoria. There is still a long way to go before she finally comes to terms with the fact that her true place is in this house and in his, and only his. That same night, Victoria saw a very strange dream, which later I could not get out of my head. In that dream, she couldn't understand where exactly she was. Everything around her was engulfed in bright orange flashes, and the woman herself could not breathe, normally because of the smoke that had entered her lungs. Bitter and acrid, this smoke enveloped all the objects that the businessman's wife tried to reach in a fruitless attempt to save them from the approaching flame. I felt the ever-increasing heat on my skin, but did not see a way out of the smoky space. Then, as if out of nowhere, two blurry figures appeared in front of her. I couldn't see exactly what they looked like, but I felt that one of them, the taller one, was a man, and the second, very small, clearly belonged to a child. Victoria, I heard a strong male voice ahead of me. Where are you? Victoria. The voice repeated her name over and over again. She didn't try to quickly shout, I'm here, but not a single sound escaped her throat. In desperation, the woman grabbed her own neck and suddenly heard a piercing, childish voice, Mom, Mommy. And she began to rush around in the blinding, fiery fog, trying to reach, or at least get closer to those ghostly figures that were calling her. She understood in her soul that she definitely needed to give them a sign that she was here, that she was alive, and that everything was fine with her. However, the blurry silhouettes moved further away the closer I tried to get to them. Victoria, finally experiencing a surge of inhuman despair, the woman screamed into the void, watching the figures move away and dissolve in the smoke. Wait, please don't leave me here. No, I want to come to you. Wake up, called her Jack. And at that moment, the woman opened her huge blue eyes. It turned out that she was still lying in her bed, and her husband was sitting next to her, bending over her and forcefully shaking her shoulders so that she would wake up. Anxiety and sadness were clearly visible on the husband's face. What's wrong with you? What did you see? The wife, not yet fully awakened from what she had seen, just shook her head and pulled her husband's hands away from her. Oh, everything is fine, Jack. Nothing. I just had a nightmare. The young woman regained her breath with difficulty and looked tenderly at her husband. May, don't worry. Give me a couple of minutes. Victoriashi turned on her other side, trying to cope with the feelings that rushed over her. What she saw in the dream was so vivid and realistic that the woman could not move away from the thought that it could very well be a memory. Just what? And why didn't she see in this strange dream Jack, as if he had nothing to do with it at all? Are you sure you don't need sedatives? I could get you some pills if you want. Looked at her husband with outright surprise. Are you serious, honey? Do you want to turn me into a vegetable? Jack tensed for a moment, but laughed lightly and threw a pillow at him. Yes, I was just joking, fool. Of course, I don't mean anything like that. Well, really, it's just a bad dream. There is no need to take pills every time I feel emotions. Jackie smiled, but somehow not joyfully, as if he felt guilty about something. However, quickly pretending that nothing had happened, he invited his beloved wife to drink coffee together. Even baked cheesecakes for us today before rushing off to work. As long as I have lived, I am always amazed at her amazing ability to combine the talents of a housewife and a businesswoman. God, how embarrassing. Pressing her hands to her face, she said, Victoria, it was I who had to get up early and prepare everything. Instead, you also have to strain your mother in the kitchen. Jackie just waved his hand, after which he tenderly kissed his wife on the cheek. You just don't know her as I do. In fact, all this amateur activity with pots has always been a joy for her. Before my father died, she was an ordinary housewife for a long time, raised me, looked after my dad when he came home from work. And then, when her father died of a heart attack, she took the business seriously. Dad left us some inheritance. She used this money to open her first beauty salon. Victoria looked at her husband with sincere interest. This was the first time he had told her so openly about his family. I was still just a boy then, about 17 years old. At first, I couldn't accept this new form of my mother. And then she clearly explained to me that in this life, you need to fight for yours to the end, gnawing it with your teeth, but not giving it to anyone. So I first entered college at the Faculty of Economics and then got a job in a bank. But gradually, I became one of the people and met you. Jack hugged with tenderness Victoria, and she allowed herself to be kissed for real. At some point, the woman thought that the dream she had was really just a meaningless nightmare. A couple of hours later, when the husband was already getting ready for work, the phone of Victoria suddenly burst out an insistent third. Looking at the screen, the woman was surprised to find that they were calling her from an unknown number. Pick up the phone, he advised her, Jack throwing his jacket over his shoulders. I'm sure you're happy about who's calling you. Really? Raised her eyebrows and answered the incoming call. It's you. An unfamiliar female voice squealed on the phone. Yes, it's Victoria. And who speaks? There was a second pause at the other end of the line, after which the same thin voice said, offended, Jack, of course. He said that you have problems with your memory, but so much so. Victoria looked at her husband again with the question, who is this? But he just winked at her and pointed to his watch. I'm in a hurry, he whispered with one lips. They hanged themselves there. After this, the husband went to work with a satisfied look, leaving Victoria in complete confusion. And she remembered that Zoe should come home in half an hour. Check on her and see if everything is okay. So, who should she have fun with? Her mother-in-law? Or the one who was literally tearing her phone to pieces? The caller continued to attack Victoria endless questions. Listen, don't you seriously remember us? It is me, Anne, your best friend. Yujiaki said that you can't get close to you while you're being treated. During this time, we were all exhausted. And yesterday, he writes to us and tells us to drag you into the city. No, well, you always had him, Mr. Spontaneity. Sorry, of course, for such frankness. Wait. And stop. I tried to pacify my interlocutor. Do you want to say that you and I were once friends before the accident? I mean, are you my best friend? Confused by the appearance of another person in her life, whom she did not remember at all, she suggested and meet in the city center, in the very cafe where they usually like to go with their husband. The woman wanted to talk to this girl and try to remember her. Still, this one Anso insisted that they had known each other for many years. However, the meeting with my friend was not impressive, Victoria, to say the least. Disappointed. Not only did she remember absolutely nothing of the things that this girl told her about, but she also turned out to be an extremely unpleasant girl in her own right. I couldn't believe that I trusted this nasty and envious girl with all my secrets. Yes, she would never share it with such a gossip. While they were sitting in the cafe, she managed to wash the bones of all their mutual friends. And although half of them, Victoria, I didn't even see her, she was offended that, and like this, without hesitation, he throws mud at everyone. So you're saying that you and I work together in the modeling business? I asked at some point. Victoriato interrupted her endless dirty tirade and paused for a second, as if her internal computer was having a hard time processing this simple question. Finally, an uncertain smile appeared on her face. Yes, and don't you remember our shows in Milan? How we discussed this famous model? She looks so beautiful in all the magazines, but in reality, she is fat. I'm still amazed at what these agents saw in her. After all, the natural one was scary. Anne laughed unpleasantly, revealing her big white teeth. She continued thoughtfully, stirring the remains of her milkshake in a tall glass with a straw. Who do I love more, dogs or cats? I asked again. What? Swatting her long, thickly painted eyelashes, her friend stared at her. And what do cats have to do with it? Victoria looked at the girl carefully. But this is such a simple question. You say you've known me almost since school. Then you can't help but know which animals I love more. All best friends answer such questions with ease, especially when some of them have memory problems. What I definitely didn't expect was that, and suddenly, out of the blue, he pulls out his mobile phone and starts hysterically writing something to someone in it. What are you doing? I asked her with a smile. She wouldn't be surprised if now she was posting some nasty stuff about her on the internet, but she didn't care at all. She just wanted to understand what was going on here. And she finished fiddling with her smartphone, and with a changing grin, obviously intended to depict a smile. You know, I was urgently called here for filming. I would be glad to chat with you more, but unlike you, I don't have a rich husband, so I have to work hard. Yeah, and quickly jumped up from the table and said, Victoria, kiss. No, be upset. We'll definitely chat again later, and then you see, you'll feel better. Kiao dear, in touch. With these words, the red-haired gossip fled from the cafe like a bright but stupid butterfly. I couldn't get rid of the thought that with this end there was something wrong. Well, it can't be that she chose such a mercantile person as her friend. Besides, she definitely didn't know the answer to her question, and all this fuss with the phone. Yes, she was just looking for an excuse to quickly leave and not continue to dive into slippery topics. But what could this mean? Victoria were at a loss. She had too many questions about her own past, and she had not yet received an answer to any of them. Hearing her own phone vibrate in her purse, the woman immediately picked up the phone. Hello, honey? How are you? I asked Jack, who called her from work. To be honest, not really, his wife admitted to him. I didn't like it at all. What kind of friend is this, who has only clothes and gossip on her mind? Is it true? There was tension in the husband's voice. You don't have to communicate with her if you want. I just thought it would be useful for you to be with old acquaintances. You said it yourself. Yes, I remember, she hastened to reassure him. It's just that this meeting turned out to be not at all as sincere as I imagined. I'm going home now, Zoe already there. I could cook us all something original for dinner tonight. They chatted a little more about household chores, after which she hung up and walked home. She wanted to take a little walk to be alone with her thoughts and just relax in silence. The weather that day was simply wonderful. Spring was in full swing. Apple trees were blooming everywhere. The flower beds were full of blooming flowers. A sea of floral herbal aromas floated in the air, and Victoria lingered for a couple of minutes in one of the courtyards near the playground. Looking at the little happy children playing in the sandbox, I felt a surge of incredible melancholy. What a pity that Kalia and I don't have our own baby. This is how I could now sit and watch our son or daughter. Maybe my soul would then feel much calmer. The young woman sat down on the bench, watching the children with pleasure. Some of them were swinging happily on the swings while their mothers looked away with a proud look. Victoria, here, they say, look, envy how happy we are growing. Suddenly she felt her hands and feet suddenly become cold. Something seemed to switch in the young woman's head, and she clearly, as if in reality, saw herself in her arms with a small child. The newborn snored sweetly. His eyes were closed. He slept. At that moment, I was absolutely sure that I was holding my own son in my arms. However, her vision did not end there. The woman felt strong and gentle arms hug her shoulders, turned around to look at the child's father, and it was he. And, to her great amazement, she saw in front of her not at all Jack. A tall, broad-shouldered, handsome man with deep dark green eyes and golden hair did not fit with the image of her husband. Jack was a stocky brunette, slender, but slightly taller than herself. This same stranger looked like he was a hero from an old fairy tale. She didn't know either the beautiful man or the child she was holding in her arms, but she was sure that both of them had the most direct relation to her. Really, Jack is there still something she's not telling her? Is it possible that before him Victoria was there another family? But then where are they? What happened to them? Intrigued, Victoria immediately hurried home. She eagerly awaited her husband's return so she could talk to him about her vision. Zoe, seeing how worried she was, she herself became nervous. Having seated her daughter-in-law in the kitchen, she tried to quickly ask her about what happened and how the meeting with her friend went. However, Victoria, at that moment, I was by no means in the mood for a sincere conversation with maybe I can help you with something. Looking in Victoria in the eyes, asked the businesswoman. Oh, I'm afraid that only Jack. She sighed. I need to talk to him very seriously. A shadow ran across the woman's face, the nature of which was impossible to determine. The young woman referred to the fact that she needed rest, after which she went upstairs to her room. That evening, when Jack came back home, Victoria immediately called him over and honestly told him about her sudden memory. After listening to his wife, the businessman was a little confused at first, but quickly pulled himself together. I was amazed at how quickly the reactions on his face changed. In a few moments, she managed to discern surprise, anger, confusion, and then an imperturbable calmness that hid all other feelings under ATSAT. Darling, listen to me very carefully. The husband began, placing his wife on the bed. What you are talking about is impossible, but why? She looked at him incomprehensibly. Jack, I feel that these people are somehow connected to me very strongly. These emotions, this image, it was so real, so familiar. If there is something that I don't know about myself, you just have to tell me Jackie covered his face with his hands, as if trying to isolate himself from his own feelings. The doctors warned me that such consequences were possible, he said slowly. You've been in a coma for too long, and part of your brain still remains not fully restored. What do you mean, Jack? I asked him again. What is wrong with me? The husband looked at her with sadness, even some guilt. Forgive me, I should have told you about everything earlier. What are you talking about? Can you explain? The husband carefully took Victoria by the hands. Her hallucinations. The doctor said that this is how the consequences of a coma can manifest themselves. Victoria couldn't immediately comprehend what her husband was telling her. When it dawned on her, she shook her head negatively. No, Jack, no. The fact of the matter is that it was not a figment of my imagination. I'm sure I saw part of my past, but I can't understand when it was and who these people are to me. Jack looked at his wife with inexpressible regret. Honey, it happens sometimes. Perhaps you experienced a powerful emotional shock when you looked at your children. So your mind tried to deceive you, to pass off wishful thinking as reality. No, she continued to persist. I know for sure that I have seen these people before. Jack, I didn't tell you about my dreams. That nightmare. My husband guessed right away. Yes, she nodded. Victoria, it seems to me that I saw the same man and boy there, only it seemed to be later than the memories on the playground. There's a face here. Jacket immediately became dark. Victoria, let's not try to find an explanation for your nonsense. Of course, I'm not very pleased that you see some strange man in your visions, but as for the child, she jumped out of bed and threw out her hands nervously. Yes, I also wanted to ask why we still don't have children. You just said that the memory could have been triggered by children playing. What did you mean? Instead of answering, the husband slowly rose from the bed, after which he calmly walked to a small cabinet with medicines and took out a syringe with a sedative. Noticing this, she stepped back. No, Jack, I don't want a sedative. Explain to me how those kids and my visions are connected. Jack, what are you doing? The young woman's eyes filled with pure horror as her husband began to advance on her, holding a ready injection in his hand. His face was completely impenetrable. Honey, everything is fine. Don't worry. You just need to calm down a little. Look at you, you're shaking all over. Victoria retreated further and further until she finally felt something hard under her back. It was a wall. The young woman's heart filled with panic. She turned around, trying to find a way out, but at that moment, her husband suddenly grabbed her hands, making it impossible to resist. Jack, please don't. I don't want to. I'm scared. Jackie pulled his wife to him with force and in one deft movement, stuck a syringe with a sedative into her neck. Don't be afraid, honey. Don't be afraid. Everything is fine. I will never let you go. Never. We will always be together. Before your eyes, Victoria, everything immediately floated away. The room was instantly filled with fog. When Jackie unclenched his embrace and carefully laid her on the bed, the woman looked at him with a completely blank look. Honey, we don't have children because you're bearing. The husband said unexpectedly affectionately. I didn't want to talk about it so as not to traumatize your already fragile psyche. However, now I see that we cannot do without it. I'll have to call you a psychotherapist tomorrow. He will prescribe you a new course of medications and you will definitely improve everything. She didn't know what kind of drug her husband was injecting her with, but she was sure that it was definitely not a sedative, more like tranquilizers. Suddenly it flashed through the woman's head, somewhere on the farthest border of her consciousness between sleep and reality. We also gave these to horses on our farm. Victoria didn't have time to grasp onto this thought because everything around her suddenly plunged into darkness. She woke up only the next morning. Jackie wasn't nearby, so I carefully slipped into the shower to wash away the remnants of sleep in a semi-conscious state caused by strange medication. Lord, didn't I really dream all this? I thought Victoria standing in front of powerful jets of hot water. Did I really remember something that Kalia didn't like, and that's why he did this to me? The woman shuddered with disgust. I remembered the terrible expression that flashed on my face, Jack, the moment he gave her the injection. God, he looked like he was crazy. I can't stay in this house next to him anymore. I need answers. Slipping out of the bathroom, Victoria, I got dressed and carefully went down to the first floor. The woman heard people quietly talking about something in the kitchen, Jack and his mother. To the surprise of Victoria, the conversation between relatives was conducted in French, and listening to their speech, I realized with amazement that I understood them perfectly. It was only when the words took on their full meaning for her that she was forced to slowly slide down the wall, sitting on the floor. Her legs refused to restrain the woman, instantly becoming weak from shock. Did I tell you that you were taking risks? Reproached Zoisen. You're just making fun of the girl in vain. Today she remembered her son, and tomorrow, God forbid, she'll talk about Pablo will remember. What will we do then if the whole truth is revealed? Speak more quietly. Shouted at her Jack French. I myself don't know why this happened. Doctors said that the effect of the drugs was 100. She shouldn't have remembered anything from her past at all. Nothing that happened to her before. Zoe, she shook her head doomedly. Do you even understand what you did? Son, you ruined her whole life. And now you continue to do the same. She will never love you. She will never be able to. Her attachment to them is too... No, Mom. Unable to restrain himself, the businessman shouted loudly, Victoria mean and only mine understand. They lost her, and I won't let you separate us. Come to your senses, Jack. I begged him, Zoe. If you don't stop now, it will only get worse. Do you really want a wife who has the memory of a fish? She really will go crazy soon. Is this what you are trying to achieve? For a moment, a painful pause hung between mother and son. And then I heard how Jack dialed someone's number on his phone. He never muted the keyboard, so the numbers and letters squeaked every time he touched them. "What are you doing?" asked him coldly, though I already in English. "Oh, I call the attending physician Victoria." He answered calmly, "No, do not dare." His mother whispered threateningly to him, "I'm not going to participate in this farce anymore. So it was only for your sake that I endured. Don't worry, Mom, I'll solve everything," he said confidently. Jack, after which he began a conversation with someone whom Victoria I haven't heard it anymore. However, this was enough for the woman, covering her mouth with her hand. So as not to scream in fear, she barely rose to her feet and quickly walked back to her room. There, the businessman's wife hastily threw some spare clothes and personal belongings into her backpack. Victoria, it was necessary to wait for the moment when Jack will go to the airport. A couple of days ago, he told his wife that he was going on a very important business trip to London. This business trip was for Victoria I's only chance to save your own life. The woman heard her husband's steps on the stairs and quickly stuffed the backpack under the bed, lay back down and pulled the blanket up to her chin, pretending that she wanted to lie down a little longer. "Here you are," he said with a smile, Jack, entering the room. "It's almost 10 a.m. It's time to get up." The man affectionately stroked his wife on the head, and she hardly squeezed out a response smile. It's just that yesterday, the day ended so unexpectedly. She pretended that she hardly remembered the previous evening. She stretched sweetly and put her hands on her husband's shoulders. He shouldn't have suspected anything. Therefore, she played her role well, albeit through force. "I'm leaving today, remember?" I asked her, Jack. And Victoria nodded in agreement. "Mom will look after you until the doctor comes," the husband continued. And at the same second on the back Victoria cold, prickly goosebumps appeared. "Behave yourself and do everything the doctor tells you, okay? And I will try to return as soon as possible. I think in 10 days, no more." Heart in the chest, Victoria very clogged. 10 days, she will have almost 2 weeks to carry out. "Oh, so long, she asked out loud, desperately pretending to be an exemplary wife. But I'll have time to get bored." Instead of an answer, Jack kissed his young wife. "That's great," he said with a satisfied smile. "I like you much better this way and forget about everything we talked about yesterday. I love you either way, with or without children." She nodded in response and smiled radiantly. As soon as the businessman left the house, the woman immediately jumped out of bed and continued to get ready. Taking some cash from the box, she shook out all the jewelry. Victoria, I felt like I was ready, no matter what her husband was planning. If he was her husband at all, she did not intend to stay in this house for another minute. She herself will find answers to all her questions and will finally find out who she is and how she ended up in this golden dungeon. Seizing the right moment, she slipped out through the emergency exit leading to the garage. And from there, she slowly made her way through the gate to freedom. As soon as the young woman crossed the threshold of the estate, everything in her soul literally began to sing. I thought to myself, "Victoria, there is nothing better or more expensive than this." Having reached the city by bus, I immediately went to an inconspicuous but decent hostel, about which I had managed to look up information in advance. And she needed to hide in a place where Jackie didn't find her right away. That is why any option with a hotel or a luxury hotel was immediately accepted. First of all, she didn't have enough money to pay for a room there. Secondly, I wanted to use my husband's bank cards to a minimum. She understood perfectly well that as soon as he discovered her absence, the first thing he would do was check the cards, having settled down in the micro number allotted to her. Victoria, I opened my laptop and started looking first for information about myself, and only then for all the psychologists in the city who, in one way or another, used hypnosis methods in their work. As she thought, there wasn't much information about her husband's family on the internet, and most of it was on Jack and his mother. True, she did find several messages about their wedding. However, there were no details or photographs from the celebration in these short notes. This is all strange, she thought to herself. Usually, when some big shot gets married, journalists are right there, but this was clearly not our case. Having finished her mini-investigation, the young woman switched to searching for a hypnotist. She was able to find one private Victoria, where a professor of psychology worked, practicing the method of aggressive hypnosis. Having changed clothes and pretending that she was really rich and wealthy, the lady went to the address indicated on the website. The psychologist turned out to be a pleasant, elderly man, about 60 years old. Looking carefully at Victoria, he asked, "Sorry, maybe I'm interfering with my own business. However, as a specialist who deals with problems of consciousness, I still need to know why exactly do you need hypnosis and therapy sessions? What do you expect from them?" Victoria answered, not at all embarrassed. "I want to get my memory back. About a year ago, I was in an accident and fell into a long-term coma. This resulted in amnesia." The professor's gray eyebrows involuntarily flew up. "Really, I'm sorry, I didn't know. But wait, you say you came out of the coma a long time ago. Why then don't you remember anything?" Victoria hesitated for a minute, thinking how best to explain the whole situation to the psychologist. Finally, "It's not that I don't remember certain moments. The problem is that I don't remember my life before the accident. Absolutely nothing." The professor looked at her somewhat surprised. "Oh, that's how it is. Oh, but this is impossible." Finished for him. "I wanted to say, it's very strange, but your option is also quite suitable." The doctor said with a soft smile, "There are, however, some things, but they flash only for a fraction of a moment, and then again become almost intangible." She spoke quietly, Victoria, and told the psychologist about her visions and dreams. George, that was the doctor's name. He agreed to help with interest Victoria, since this was the first time I encountered such an interesting case. He assured the worried woman that the hypnosis sessions were absolutely safe for her psyche, and she should not worry about anything. "The only thing I have to warn you about," said George, "don't expect a lightning-fast effect. Sometimes it may take up to 6 to 8 sessions for a person to remember and restore missing memory block, and sometimes everything works out almost the first time. It all depends on the depth of psychological trauma that you appear to have suffered during the accident. It was she who made your memory block something that still hurts you." And Victoria nodded at him, although she was incredibly worried about what she could remember. But as soon as they started their first session with the psychologist, then it was their turn. George be a lot of surprise. "Oh, I'll be honest with you. This is my first time with a patient like you," he honestly admitted to the young woman. "Usually I can pull out from my consciousness at least something related to early childhood or adolescence. But you..." The psychologist spread his hands and smiled slightly confused. "You are like a blank sheet of paper, a notebook with only white blank pages inside." Victoria felt the blood gushing from her face. "Is that possible?" The doctor thought for a moment and nodded. "Yes, but only if during treatment you were treated with potent drugs in sufficient quantities. They can not only destroy memory, but also completely erase the identity of the person taking them. If this is possible, I would like to see your medical record. This would help us shed light on everything that is happening." Victoria sadly shook her head. "I'm afraid it is impossible. My husband probably has the card, and we are, let's say, not on the best terms right now." In response to this, the psychologist only shrugged his shoulders. "Well, then we can only hope that your memory will gradually relax and release all the information you need." She returned to the hostel that day very disappointed. What the doctor said. After all, it could very well be true. Jack never told her about the methods that doctors used on her in an effort to restore the functioning of her brain. A week passed and she still didn't remember anything, although 3 sessions had already passed. Georgie tried to use different approaches, even going as far as art therapy, all just so that at least the slightest glimpse of memories appears inside the head. But it was all in vain. At some point, Victoria even almost resigned myself to the fact that for some reason I would never be able to remember my life before the accident. However, the doctor assured her that it was too early to give up. "I'm sure that we can achieve at least some result," the psychologist insisted. Victoria, I almost lost hope. The saddest thing is that I no longer saw flashes in which that mysterious man and little boy would appear. Was it really just a figment of imagination? In despair, the woman thought about this, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. After all, she so wanted to believe that it was these people who carried the key to her personality and past life. At the 3rd session, something strange happened, and when the psychologist had already put the woman into a trance, A fire alarm suddenly went off above them in the office. The smoke detector began to make a heart-rending squeak, and George jumped up from the table in surprise. Victoria she felt a strange feeling, as if something similar had happened to her before. Since she could not get out of the trance without the help of a psychologist, she tried with all her might to cling to this feeling of déjà vu, hoping that it would at least lead her to something, and she succeeded. The fog in which I had been wandering during the hypnosis sessions, all this time suddenly began to dissipate. Images from the past flashed before the woman one after another. They fell upon her with such furious force that it seemed that if it could be described physically, then Victoria was literally knocked off my feet by the strongest water flow, which all these months had been held back by an artificial dam of chemicals. Victoria she suddenly felt short of breath, and she tried to open her mouth wide to breathe, when at that very moment I felt the acrid, bitter smoke. And inhaling this smoke in my memories, Victoria finally remembered everything. Her real name was Victoria, but her last name was different, and Jack was not her husband at all. Just a little over a year ago, the woman had a completely different, absolutely happy life. Her real husband's name was Pablo, and he really was the same broad-shouldered, handsome man from her knowledge. Pablo is a businessman specializing in the agricultural segment. Simply put, Victoria had his own huge farm in another city, and also a small breeding laboratory, where she herself bred new varieties of flowers and some types of other plants. Victoria, I've never worked as a model. The woman remembered that she had a biological education behind her. She learned French while still a student on a course 5 years ago. He even lied about her husband's parents. They really died, but not at all in the way he described. There was no sign of anyone going there. I was just a very late child with my mother and father. They were already over 40 when the girl was born. Mother Victoria died of a stroke when Victoria turned 19. My father died much later as a result of a fishing accident. The man fell through the ice and died from hypothermia. So there is not a single word of truth in the words of the imaginary husband Victoria. Never happened. Pablo Theodore, the woman whispered in a trance. My dears, how could I live so long without you? Where are you, my dear ones? Theodore is the name of their little 3-year-old son, whom the couple loved more than anything in the world. Pablo and Victoria could be called an ideal couple. Their life was also the same until he appeared in a Jack. I remembered very clearly the day his SUV appeared in the driveway in front of their farm gate. He introduced himself as a major investor and told her husband that he would like to get acquainted with his farm, since he had heard a lot about their environmentally friendly agricultural products. Pablo didn't mind showing the farm. However, he was indecently angry at the thought that some city businessman who had never been familiar with his business would suddenly decide, out of the blue, that he could dictate to him. The businessman imposed his terms on them on the grounds that he had invested a certain amount of money in their production. However, Jack was very persistent, and all the time while his husband was giving him a tour, the banker painted rosy prospects for their company entering the international market. At the end of the day, Pablo, being a very sincere and decent person, invited Jack to drink tea at their house, and then Jack saw it for the first time of Victoria. The young woman, in no word or deed, gave the city investor any reason to hope for anything more than simple cordiality and politeness. However, Jack, amazed by the truly rare beauty of Victoria, firmly decided to win the woman from her legal husband. I remembered that even then this love of his looked more like some kind of strange obsession. That evening Jack literally didn't let me down. Victoria and Pablo, being far from stupid, noticed this immediately. Victoria Petrovna, I think I'll come see you next week, if you don't mind, of course. I want to show you the company's development plan, with which I am sure you will have every chance of becoming one of the most popular farms in the whole country in the shortest possible time. Well, let's see, he answered evasively. Pablo, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Jack. After all, everything you see around you belongs to me. As the owner, I have the right to have the last word. At this moment, the tall, green-eyed man looked expressively first at Jack and then to his wife. He, embarrassed, went into the kitchen under the pretext that she still needed to wash the dishes for the guests. She did not hear any further dialogue, but she clearly saw through the window how a guest coming out of their yard furiously kicked an old bucket that was standing in their yard after which he walked to his expensive car and, getting into its interior, loudly slammed the door. When the businessman raised his face for a second, I managed to see that he was distorted by an eerie expression, exactly the same as he had on the day he placed Victoria that terrible prick. "What did you say to him?" she asked with alarm Pablo when he entered the kitchen. She didn't like that abnormal sparkle in her eyes. "Jack, nothing special." The husband answered with a slight grin. "Don't worry, darling, these are our men's affairs. He has nothing to be offended about, believe me." She tucked her lace shawl tighter, looking at the investor's UV that had disappeared in the distance. "I don't like him," she admitted honestly then. "There's something so dangerous about him." Pablo laughed lowly and gently hugged his wife to him. "Don't be afraid, Victoria. This city whip will come here one more time or two when he realizes that he has nothing to catch here, and he'll fall back to his capital." Husband Victoria was right, and Jack indeed. He came to their farm 3 more times, and his last meeting with him Pablo and the man had a big quarrel, and because of her, because of Victoria. A man seized the moment when Pablo, as not nearby, forcefully pressed his young wife against the wall of the greenhouse where the woman was working that day. I didn't even have time to shout before Jack literally attacked her with kisses. "Yeah, darling, sweet," he whispered, trying to leave numerous marks of his lips on her face. "But you are a real queen. Why are you living with an idiot like this, Pablo? Come with me to the city, and you will have everything you want. Cars, money, jewelry. Just be mine, and you should be mine." Experienced an almost physical attack of faintness, trying to push this clingy businessman away from you. She somehow freed herself from his grip and grabbed the box scoop that was lying nearby. "I love my husband. Our child is growing. Aren't you ashamed to behave this way? My husband let you into our house, and you allow yourself such monstrous things." Jack smiled, raising his hands conciliatorily, and was about to move to the side of Victoria a couple of steps. But she expressively waved the sharp blade of a scoop in front of his nose. "Oh, get out of here. Until I told my husband everything, and you don't need to tell me anything, my dear. I see everything already." A voice sounded behind Karpov's back. "Pablo, what about you, Jack? Are you really behaving like a brute?" With these words, in one sitting he catched me by the collar and escorted the businessman out into the yard, after which he forcefully threw him to the ground. "What do you allow yourself?" almost screamed Jack, trying to get up from the ground. "How dare you? Yes, I will not leave your farm unturned. Don't let me see you here again, you mummered pheasant," he shouted at him in a stern voice. "Pablo, otherwise I'll pull out both legs, hang it on a stick instead of a stuffed animal, and put it in my garden. You'll scare the crows." The businessman's face took on that same crazy expression, seasoned with feelings of anger and his own powerlessness. The giant man looked at him as if a well-fed cockroach was crawling in front of him, who was also trying to swing his license, trying to eat from the human table. "You have 10 seconds to get into the car and leave my farm forever," said in a threatening voice Pablo. "Otherwise, you can blame yourself. So 10-9, you will still be with me." I shouted for the last time, Jack, literally crawling into his car. "You just don't understand yet. You should be with me, Victoria. You should be mine." Pablo pretended to take a swing at the businessman, but he had already started the engine, and a minute later was driving out of their yard. Trembling, she clung to her husband, and he calmed her down for a long time, promising his wife that she would never see this scoundrel again. Victoria, then, I prayed that it would be so. But deep inside, she still had some bad feeling. People like Jack never deviates from what he wants. And very soon the family had to verify this. In just a few days, Victoria, I woke up at night to the strong smell of smoke and the frightened screams of my son. Jumping out of bed, the woman saw with horror how 3 huge big men in masks burst into the room where she was sleeping, along with her husband. She screamed, but the answer was deathly silence. Having managed to look out the window, she saw with horror how their beautiful wooden house was being devoured by fiery flames. A fiery hell reigned everywhere, and the husband and son were not nearby. Victoria didn't understand what happened and where her whole family was. However, with her loud screams, the woman attracted the attention of those same bandits. Well, that's where she was. "Look," one of them wheezed and began to slowly approach her. "Come on, grab her quickly." The chief ordered her to be taken straight to the hospital. There, they say, people who already know will take care of it. No, she screamed heart-rendingly when two thugs roughly grabbed her by the arms and dragged her to the stairs leading down. She resisted and resisted with all her might. But how could she defeat such thugs? "Be quiet, you chicken." One of them slapped her in the face, and she involuntarily fell silent, curling up into a ball in pain. After these words, Victoria, I felt something very thin and sharp in my neck. Needle. She managed to think before passing out. They are trying to poison me with something. I remembered everything else very vaguely. The faces of some doctors in white medical masks were bending over her, and from time to time, a satisfied face appeared. Jack. Apparently, he initially sent her to some private clinic where they treated her so well that they completely erased the young woman's memory of her past family and life. Victoria, I heard someone's voice through the memories. "Victoria, wake up. Listen to my voice. Wake up to the count." She suddenly opened her eyes and sat down on the couch where she had been lying all this time, immersed in her own memories. George, it turned out I remembered everything, from the excitement of the hands Victoria shook with small tremors. But still, she was happy that she got her memory and personality back. "Victoria, you screamed like that while you were in a trance." The psychologist began in confusion. "I didn't understand much of what you said, but it's obvious that you were having a dialogue with someone." The woman stood up and warmly thanked the elderly doctor. Thank you, Professor. I can't explain everything to you now, but I very urgently need to go to one place to make sure that everything I saw is real. Just don't forget to look at me again later. We need to fill out some paperwork regarding the work done. Necessarily. She firmly shook his hand and assured him. And now, excuse me, but I really need to go. The psychologist could not hold his client. He just smiled and wished her luck. "Oh, I'm glad you were able to find yourself again." That's all he said. "Me too." She nodded to him. "Victoria, if it weren't for you and this fire alarm, I don't even know what would have happened to me next." Pushing from the psychologist straight to the station, Victoria Shea waited for the first train going to her city and jumped inside. Having reached the station she needed, the woman went straight to the bus stop and from there went to her native farm. When she approached the gates of the place that had been her home for many years, her heart, Victoria, I wanted to scream from pain and hopelessness. Her house, all buildings and personal experimental greenhouses, Victoria, all this was destroyed by fire. The fire was so strong that absolutely nothing remained of the former greatness of the agricultural complex, except huge black spots, ashes and pieces of charred. Falling to her knees in front of the ashes that were once her home, Victoria burst into tears, no longer able to contain the feelings that had been accumulating in her for so long. The worst thing was that she never found out what happened to her family, her real family. At that moment, a roar of an engine was heard not far from the woman, and a few minutes later the subject was already standing in front of the half-collapsed farm gate. "SAUCC, are you out of your mind?" An angry man attacked her. What does it mean?" "Because of you, I left London 3 days early. When my mother called me and said that you had disappeared, and she was almost crawling up the wall with work for so long, I was afraid to talk about your escape. And you sit here admiring the ashes." Jack approached the woman and forced her to look at him. Victoria, she raised her eyes to him, dark as the sky before a thunderstorm. She slowly rose from her knees and struck Jack in the face. "Not dare," she said quietly, looking at her tormentor with hatred. "Don't you dare tell me what to do. You destroyed my family." He looked at him in amazement, Victoria, but she didn't let him say a word. "Yes, I remembered everything. How could you do this to me? You're not even my husband. You are nobody. You just got into our family like a bug, like a rat, and completely destroyed everything. Everything we have." Blah built with such lore, began to choke on sobs, but intended to express Jack everything I thought. "I know that there was no accident. You just handed me over to some private hospital and poisoned me there with all sorts of rubbish so that I would completely forget everything. Where's my family, bastard? Where is the husband? Where is my son?" With every question, I beat Jack fist in the chest, trying to take out all the pain of his heart torn to shreds. Finally, Karpov caught both her hands and pushed Victoria. The woman fell backwards into dust and ash, which seemed to be firmly ingrained into the local soil. Yes, I took it for you. pulled you out of this village swamp and showed you a normal human life because you were created for such a life and not for all this. Jackie gestured around the ruins of the farm. If you want to know, I hope to the last that you would not try to find out something about your past. I thought my love was enough for both of us. God, how wrong I was. Jack slowly walked around Victoria like a predator its prey. I even set this house of yours on fire, along with your not very pleasant husband and your entire complex. I hoped that if there was not even a reminder of who you once were, you would finally think and choose me and our wonderful life together. Victoria, everything was shaking, but she held on with all her strength. Scoundrel. You, as she shouted to him. I'll write a statement against you. They'll put you in prison. Jack just smiled unpleasantly. Oh, nobody will prove anything. My sweet. How did you find me? I asked in despair. Were you following me? Jack grinned. I figured out where you are from that tiny tracking device I placed in your phone. As soon as I arrived here, I immediately rushed here. Where did you want to spend these few days? When I learned that you went to a psychologist, I realized that anything could happen, so I went straight for you. The man did around Victoria one more lap. If you really want to know where your child is, then I will answer. He is in an orphanage. I just don't know which one. I ordered my people to throw your boy to them. And don't even tell me where, so that you don't have the opportunity to find him later if something goes wrong. She slowly rose to her feet, looking at him with all the hatred she could muster. You're a monster, she spat in his face. We will never be together, even if you remain the last man on earth. Even if you looked at me, I have all my memory and I won't remember my own name. We will never be together. Do you hear? Never. Because I hate you and I will always feel this hatred in my heart. How I felt that you were nobody to me. How I felt that I had Pablo, a man whom I will love with all my heart always, even after his death. Exhausted, she bent over and expected that the businessman would probably just want to kill her now. But to her great amazement, the face Jack distorted by a grimace of real mental pain. However, this only lasted for a moment before contempt flashed in his eyes again. Stupid. What a fool you were, Victoria. I gave you everything. I gave myself all to you, and you, an ungrateful, hysterical woman, for some reason got involved in something that you should not have known at all. Jack kicked the woman forcefully in the stomach, and Victoria immediately gasped in pain. Midges flashed in her eyes. Sorry, he said, pulling out the barrel. Did you ask for it yourself? Me, if only you would listen to me and not your stupid heart. Everything could be completely different now. Victoria, realizing that the inevitable ending was coming for her, closed her eyes and whispered quietly, Pablo, darling, I'm coming to you, my beloved. And at that same second, she felt a shadow fly past her. There was a roar, but the woman did not feel anything. She only cowered in horror. Opening her eyes, she saw someone big and strong striking Jack blows one after another, knocking the barrel out of his hands. You bastard, take it. She heard a painfully familiar, quiet voice. Pablo May, not believing her ears, she said, Victoria, EU, is it really you? Pablo knocked out the villain, slowly recovered and turned to his wife. Rushing to his wife, he grabbed the police in his arms and tenderly squeezed them in his arms, exhausted by sobs. Everything is all right, my dear. Now everything will definitely be fine. I'm alive. He's alive too. He nodded towards the scoundrel. Don't worry, this bastard will still live. He's only now in the cell. I filmed everything on video, how he mocked you and what he said about our farm here. I think this will be quite enough for the police. And Victoria, she carefully pulled away from her husband. Pablo, tell me what happened then. How did you manage to get out of the house? Hey Theodore, did you hear what he said about our son? The giant man stroked his beloved's cheek and smiled tenderly at her. Nay, calm down, son. At home, we now live in another city. I couldn't stay here knowing you were dead. But in any case, that's exactly what I thought then. Rapla told Victoria that he managed to get out of the burning house in time when he discovered that everything around was on fire. They stunned me, Emboliety. I saw how they were trying to get into the house, so I wanted to fight them off. But they turned out to be strong, the bastards. I woke up already in the back room. Apparently, they hoped that I would burn there alive and burn, but they didn't know that we had a small passage there. I accidentally blocked it with garden tools, and it seemed like I couldn't see it from the inside. Pablo looked around to see if everything was Jack, that is, whether he came to his senses. Fortunately, he remained unconscious. I got out through him. First, he broke the glass, and then he unrolled the boards to make it more convenient. Explained to my wife Pablo. After that, his look became incredibly sad. He hugged again Victoria. She answered him, "I buried you, Victoria." He said slowly, "When the fire was put out, all I found was your bracelet and ring. I thought you just died in the flames." "No, they put me to sleep and took me away." "You heard?" "Yes. And he will have to answer for this in court. You'll see." The man assured her, righteous anger burning in his eyes at that moment. I found my son almost immediately. I couldn't believe that they were ready to send a guiltless child to the next. These thugs are not as smart as their owner expected them to be. Her husband explained to her, "They sent our son to the first nearest orphanage. I didn't even have to go to the neighboring region. He took it right away." He, of course, was pretty scared, but it's okay, he's a strong guy. He says, "I was waiting for you to come for me. I believed that you would take me away from bad people." Victoria no longer restrained her emotions and kissed her lawful husband deeply. "Take me to our home, please," his wife asked. "I really want to see my son, and I really want to be with you in our new home." Pla smiled, and wrinkles gathered in small groups at the corners of his eyes. "Of course, my beloved. Let's just call the police first. It wouldn't do to just leave this gentleman like that." When the outfit arrived, Pablo explained everything to them in detail and showed them the recording. The investigator was shocked to learn that such an influential person could commit such a monstrous crime because of a banal obsession with a woman, even one as beautiful as she was. Victoria, now, to the false husband Victoria faces a long prison sentence. His mother, having learned about what had happened, immediately left for another city. She no longer wanted to help her son with his crimes. "You made the mess yourself, now clean it up yourself," she said. Goodbye, Jack. Pablo and Victoria returned to their new home, located in a neighboring town. Pablo, who had lost almost everything, did not lose heart. He hoped that eventually he could build a new farm for their family and start over. He still has connections with some of his former employees, so he has no doubts about success. Theodore, having learned that his mother was alive, he took it for a real miracle. The baby, who is almost 5, now lights a candle at home because he loves her very much and missed her very much. All this time until Victoria was actually in captivity of the businessman. The family is back together and now truly happy. After all, they were able to pass such tests that not every person has to endure. Victoria sincerely believes that only devotion and faith in her heart helped her ultimately remember her beloved husband and son and rediscover herself.